President, I'm here. This is Sophia.
Dr. Rios, we can do a roll call through Natalie.
Okay, hi Natalie, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Can you please do a roll call of board members?
Hello, yes, I can. President Dr. Rios,
Present?
Vice President Mendoza,
Present.
Board Clerk Yu,
Present.
Board Member Dr. Apodaca,
Here.
Board Member Law,
Present.
Board Member Nishii,
Here.
Board Member Say.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we're all here. Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Roll call again, please, Natalie.
President Dr. Rios,
Present?
Vice President Mendoza,
Present.
Board Clerk Yu,
Here.
Board Member Dr. Apodaca,
Here.
Board Member Law,
Present.
Board Member Nishii,
Present.
Board Member Say.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to call on, let me see, Board Member Dr. Apodaca. Can you lead us on the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I can. Please stand. Face the flag, a flag. Place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated.
Thank you. Board Clerk, can you please read our public comment section?
Thank you, Madam President. For public comments, I have a question for our legal counsel before I read the comments.
Okay.
Public comments by law, we are required to read the public comments when it comes in. True?
That is the during this pandemic, since a lot of board meetings are virtual, the board has the option of either setting up some remote system like Zoom to allow for public comment, or it can take messages by email, for example, or text, and then read them out. You can establish timelines like you do at any board meeting, and the purpose or the subject matter of the public comments must be something that is within the jurisdiction of the board.
I see. Are we still required to read it even if it is anonymous? We don't have any contact.
Yeah, that is a very good question. The Brown Act does not permit the board to ask somebody to sign in when they go into a regular meeting. The Brown Act is silent with respect to public comment and whether you can or cannot ask for the identity of the person. If there is a good content neutral reason to ask for names, for example, if you utilize Zoom, you would have to identify the person by name so that they could be unmuted. Then there would be a good content neutral reason to do that. The Brown Act does allow you to establish reasonable rules and regulations regarding public comment, so long as it's content neutral. So the answer, that's a long way of a short answer. You can do it. You can ask for the identity of the individual if there's a good reason to do that. My personal opinion, because there's obviously no case law on this right now, is that there is good reason, even when you're reading public comments, to ask people to identify themselves simply because you want one person, a person to only speak once in public session, and asking for identity simply for that purpose would not be inappropriate. At this point, I think my understanding is your protocol has been just to read public comments, regardless if they're anonymous or not. So,
Mhm.
and that's not inappropriate. The Brown Act does allow you to do more than it requires.
Yes, because we are not able to follow up without any contact info nor the name. Mm,
Yes,
yeah. Mhm.
that would be a secondary reason.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
You're
I was
welcome.
informed that we would do public comments differently starting in September. So,
Yeah. The board can adopt reasonable rules and regulations regarding that. And also, my personal opinion is I've done a lot of virtual board meetings. The better ones are the ones that have allowed for some kind of zooming into the meeting by the public. They send in their request, they are called, they are unmuted. And my recommendation is probably 3 minutes,
3
so that
minutes.
we get as many comments as we possibly can. You folks now have 5 minutes and an hour. That would limit it to 12 comments, and many times you'll have more than that. So my
Yes, we have.
recommendation is always 3 minutes. So
Yes, yes. Thank you for that recommendation. I will read the public comments.
thank you.
Persons wishing to address the board should submit their comments during the public comment period, which runs from 8 a.m. Tuesday to August 11th, 2020, until the public comments section first via following method. Submit comment form by abcusd.org public comments. This will change starting September. Comments submitted will be presented during the public comment section, which is limited to 1 hour, and each speaker to one presentation of 5 minutes unless the board wishes to waive the time limit. Those who have a group concern are encouraged to select a spokesperson to address the board. Comments submitted regarding a specific agenda item will be presented following the staff comments and prior to the board's discussion and taking action. Adverse remarks about a person's race, ancestry, ethnic group identification, religion, color, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender, mental, or physical handicap or age may not be made. Concerns presented to the board will be followed up and addressed by the appropriate staff. I will now turn to Scott Smith, our communication director.
Scott, before you begin, just a minute. Sue, Dr. Sue, can you please introduce our speaker today? Not our speaker, our guest, Mr. Baca.
Thank you so much, President Rios. We do have joining us in our board meeting today, Jim Baca, who is an attorney with Atkinson, Anderson, Lawyer, Romo, and Rudd. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. Okay, you may continue, or Scott.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Rios. Thank you, Board Clerk Yu. I appreciate the introduction here. Tonight we had 40 public comments submitted for the meeting during the public comment period, which began this morning at 8 a.m. The public comments will be read in the order they were received and comply with board policy, which was just read. Public comments submitted are being read verbatim, and the views expressed are those of the speakers. This is a special meeting tonight, so we will read the public comments submitted in line with the agenda items for tonight's meeting. I will read those verbatim now. The first one is from Tricia Senthilnathan. Thank you for letting me speak today. After submitting and reading my comment aloud last week, over 50 people, including students, ABC staff, and teachers and parents have reached out to me in favor of supporting my organization that I've created in order to help our students in providing resources and also a safe space for all to feel united in making a change. In the short times We Rise Above was in schools, many students felt comforted by the fact that there is a program like this. I am sure after hearing the many stories about sexual violence from last week's comments and the amount of emails you probably received, it is most likely time for change, whether it is online school or in-person school. WRA's program is adaptable to both. We have a very rich very rich material that is not only eye-opening, but is also necessary for our students to learn before they enter into the real world. As sad as it is to hear that this type of violence is prevalent, it does not take away from the fact that it exists and our students are unprepared. We cannot continue to push it aside. Many alumni from the district have reached out to me saying they wish WRA existed at the time they were in school, so they had prior knowledge before the workforce or college. In order to make change, we must actually address issues that are occurring in our society. That is one thing Girl Scouts has taught me and has stuck with me for a long time. As a student leader that has developed a voice in the community and become someone who not only voices the opinion of others, but also helps others voice their own opinions by themselves, I believe that it is very important we start to hear their perspectives and bring change that will benefit not only them, but everyone else as well. I hope this is eye-opening enough for us to start working together to bring support and change to help our students have a voice and feel safe, as that is the goal. Change is most appropriate now as momentum and the resources are available. Thank you. The next message is from Kayla. Stop the discrimination in the district. I called a report. The lady told me to stop making up some rumors, and she was asking my name. Why you guys don't check it first, the report. The next public comment is from Mabel Classic. Kindly please discuss how you handle sexual allegations, sexual abuse, and harassment when it happens at the school. Claire, do you report sexual abuses in the police or sheriff's department? Buddy, as a mandated reporter, do you always report abuses to the authorities? The next public comment was submitted by Ruben Mancias. Good evening, Board President Dr. Rios, Superintendent Dr. Sue, members of the board, members of the cabinet, ABC employees, students, parents, and members of the community. My name is Ruben Mancias. I am concerned with what transpired at our last board meeting regarding anonymous accusations being made against ABC employees and students in a forum that doesn't allow for anyone an opportunity to respond in a timely and appropriate manner. I find it ironic that teachers will be asked to deliver instruction in a live synchronous setting on a daily basis with students of all ages in less than 2 weeks, but our board meetings are unable to meet this standard despite being held only twice a month with an audience made up of primarily of adults. If we can do it for students, I request that we raise our standard to make these meetings truly public and democratic. Yes, public comments can be submitted via email in the morning of the meeting, but in our typical setting, members of the community have the opportunity to react and respond in live time to anything said during the meeting. Since no one knows ahead of time what might be said, it is unrealistic to assume that a pre-written email can suffice as meaningful input. A public meeting should be just that. I'm fortunate to teach English to high school students here in ABCUSD. Unfortunately, I was often reminded of Arthur Miller's play, The Crucible, during our last meeting. A person's name is not only their identity, it is a symbol of their integrity. To hear employees and students anonymously accused with no ability for recourse is not who we are as a district or as a community. The issues discussed during the meeting are very important. Harassment is something that we should all work together to eradicate. No teacher wants their students exposed to such behaviors. Please let us work together to put practices and supports in place so that we can address this crucial concern. But we have a district complaint process, and it should not be allowed to devolve into a public airing of anonymous allegations. Please let us work together to return these meetings to the spirit in which they are intended. Live synchronous opportunities make the public meeting the open democratic process that the Brown Act describes. What can we provide for our students? We owe our community as well. Thank you. One moment. The next comment is from Ceres Rotondo. My name is Ceres Rotondo, and I'm a Cerritos High School alumna, leading a public comment signed by over 650 and still growing current and former students and local community members on sexual harassment. We request the implementation of sexual harassment policy in ABCUSD immediately, and request to further this discussion on the September Board of Education agenda. Sexual harassment and assault has been heavily normalized within ABCUSD. Looking back as alumni and community members, we are now aware that it was the norm for nudes to be distributed, for teachers to get too close, make uncomfortable comments, or physically sexualize our bodies. As a student, I was trained by my superiors to adhere to the phrase, "boys will be boys," without even realizing. It wasn't until I experienced an unwanted sexual act that I had to research the words. What is sexual harassment? What is sexual assault? And it wasn't until recently, through proper education and community outreach, that I was able to clearly understand, identify, and distinguish the definition of sexual coercion, sexual harassment, and sexual assault. On behalf of the ABC community and the over 650 signees to this comment, I couldn't help but think that if I and countless other students had prior knowledge about sexual harassment assault and were protected by more transparent, strict, and explicit sexual harassment policies within ABCUSD, then maybe what happened to me and us could have been prevented. Under the Healthy Youth Act, located on abc.us, it is required in our district, once in middle school and once in high school, with new language about healthy attitudes, healthy behaviors, and healthy relationships, to teach about sexual education. This includes the information about sexual harassment, sexual assault, adolescent relationship abuse, intimate partner violence, and more. The Healthy Youth Act took effect in January 2016, yet none of the criteria above was implemented when I went through something as a high school student. I had never heard nor was taught this act thoroughly in school. This month, I created a simple poll to see if students had the same lack of knowledge while attending ABCUSD. Out of 108 ABCUSD students surveyed, only 11 students reported being educated on sexual harassment, while 96 did not. Out of those 11 students, over half reported being educated on sexual harassment by female teachers who were personally compelled to speak about it due to its absence in their curriculums, while the remaining were taught primarily through independent sex ed courses. Even in the few cases where sexual harassment was discussed in sex ed, it was constantly described as brushed over and only discussed once out of their entire school career. In January 2014, Governor Jerry Brown also enacted the Yes Means Yes law, which has also not been properly taught nor touched upon in our schools. In California, a no isn't what negates a sexual advancement. The absence of a yes makes it illegal to sexually harass or assault a person. To remedy this, ABCUSD needs a larger emphasis on victims' rights and can look to its own student population to attest to the significant culture of sexual harassment and assault on ABCUSD campuses. Recently, ABCUSD students publicly stated their truths of misconduct on school grounds or during their time in elementary, middle, and high school, evidently contributing to an alarming recurring pattern. Over the last few weeks, I spoke to over 45 students who have experienced or witnessed sexual misconduct across ABCUSD. Frequent cases include coaches, and most prevalently, the distribution of child pornography in Artesia, Cerritos, Gar, and Whitney High School. Of the 45 students I spoke to, only 17 students felt comfortable and safe to report their teacher or admin, to a teacher or admin. Despite efforts, 12 out of the 17 students who reported continued to experience misconduct from the same perpetrator, if not from other peers who had heard about the case. One moment. The next comment is from Michaela Bertundo. Excuse me. My apologies. My computer is not cooperating with me. Okay, the next public comment is from a classified staff member. To be honest, I have mixed feelings right now. I am relieved that we are finally addressing the recent forthcoming of sexual assault allegations from our students, but at the same time, I am very disappointed that it has taken this long. ABCUSD needs to take every allegation seriously, including members from our board. President Dr. Rios last week mentioned that the board's job is not to investigate, but to follow up with the proper staff and superintendent. I strongly disagree with her remarks because as a board member, you should be able to hold all ABC district employees accountable for failing to act or pursue justice. In general, board members should not be complaining about having to wake up early or being tired from long work days. That's not an excuse to do your job. You signed up for this commitment, the voters put you through, and you took an oath. If you're worried about your work schedule, that your work schedule is going to conflict with your duties too much, then you need to reconsider your board member position. I've been an elected board member myself of a nonprofit with 37,000 constituents on top of other commitments, and I understand that it can be tough, but at the same time, it should be a priority besides family. You should at least have bi-weekly meetings. If no changes are made soon following this meeting, the entire ABCUSD family, community, and alumni will be ashamed and will resort to reaching out to people in higher positions of power, including the DA, state legislators, and maybe the Attorney General, for failure to end the cycle of trauma and abuse without accountability. I'm choosing to remain anonymous as a current classified male staff member because I too have been sexually harassed and narrowly escaped assault when I was an 8th grade student at Tetzloff Middle School from 2011 to 2012. And I already moved on from this experience and don't want any more attention from this. This is my story. I was in a history honors class, first period, and my teacher was in the middle of a lesson. Students were in groups of 4 at their desks. One boy at my table thought it was funny to start masturbating during class and had one arm under the table reaching for his private area and pretended to look attentive so the teacher wouldn't notice. Me and 2 of the other classmates that were in a group together with him were disturbed and urged him to stop. However, he kept on going until he had bodily fluids on his hand. The boy then asked if we wanted to touch his hand. I told him no because I figured out what was on his hands. But then he started to touch me with his wet hand and I panicked. I managed to avoid contact with him by threatening to tell on him in the middle of our lesson. He eventually backed off. However, in 3rd period, the same boy threatened to make contact with me with his bodily fluids after class. When the bell rang, I darted out of class and the boy followed me. I started to run as fast as I could with my backpack and binder to my 4th period geometry class, and he soon gave up chasing me during the passing period. What I regret is that I never told Dr. Wise, Miss Stofers, Mr. Woodward, Miss Husband, my teachers, nor my own mother. I'm not sure if the 2 classmates did either. It doesn't matter because ABCUSD never really focused enough of preventing and addressing sexual assault or harassment. Watching a 30-minute video or 2 once a year is not enough to educate students. It wasn't until I began college when I fully understood the seriousness of sexual assault and its consequences. I learned so much more in one semester than my entire education at ABCUSD because they make it a priority for their students. Students should be fully aware and be constantly reminded of the consequences and risks for engaging in this type of behavior. I strongly suggest that every student from 7th grade and on be educated on Title IX, sexual behavior and its repercussions. Most importantly, we need to give our students a voice and always allow them to be heard immediately, not tabled or have inconclusive investigations. Every time you allow a student to go unpunished, when evidence is clearly present, you allow that suspect to potentially commit the same act again and put the victims in an unsafe environment. Stop cutting slack for the athletes, especially those in football. The next public comment is from Vicky Yamashita. As a longtime staff member of Cerritos High School, I can attest to the concerns from students as it pertains to sexual harassment, bullying, catcalling, and worse. I can also attest to the complaints about racial and gender microaggressions. School sites in the district must take a more proactive stance to support our students. Aggressions between staff must also be taken more seriously. The final public comment is from a concerned parent. I am a parent of a student in the ABC Unified School District. I am concerned with the way the board has handled the sexual harassment situation. Me and my daughter have been keeping up with the progress. Sadly, there hasn't really been any. We send our kids to school in hopes that they'll be protected, yet we are hearing different. Please protect these students and show the students who involve themselves in these disgusting acts against other students that consequences will be taken against them. That is the final public comment for this evening.
Thank you, Scott. We will now move on to action item. Budget revisions for the 2020-2021 school year, tabled from the August 4th, 2020 board meeting. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second by Sophia.
Thank you. Dr. Sue?
Thank you very much. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the budget revisions as it pertains to cash deferrals, the CARES Act, as well as the restoration plan that we want to share with all of you. And so at this time, I would like to turn it over to Tuan Nguyen, our Assistant Superintendent of Business Services.
Thank you, Dr. Sue. Good evening, Dr. Olga Rios, Board President, member of the board. I'm going to ask Mr. Machado to help me with the presentation. Here it is. So this is not a normal year, and that's an understatement. So normally you do not see an August budget revisions. The board adopted the board meeting at the board adopted the budget for the school district for the current year back in June, on June 16, based on the latest information at the time, which was the May revisions by the governor. If you recall, at that time, the board had to adopt with some difficult decisions regarding budget cuts, but along with that, there was a restoration plan should the cuts from the governor did not materialize. And tonight, with this budget revisions, we have good news. It is better than the budget that the board approved back in June. It provides flat funding for school districts. And when I say flat funding, and that's better because if you remember, the governor proposed to cut school district funding by 10%. So 10% on the LCFF or the local control funding formula, and at least 10% on all categorical programs. So because of that proposal by the governor, we had to make a lot of adjustments to our budget, including the recommended furlough days, among other items that the board had to, that the board approved. However, tonight, not only that we will restore most of that, as I will share with the board, we are receiving an additional almost $12 million in one-time federal money under the CARES Act. That, with a caveat, it's one, is restricted, and two, it must be spent by December 30th. So we have about 4.5 months to spend that money. So I'll talk more about that. Next slide, please. So the final budget, as I shared with the board by the state, is much better for school district than the governor made revisions. It provides flat funding for to the LCFF, local control funding formula, and categorical grants for school districts versus a 10% cut. So instead of getting a 10% cut, we receive flat funding. Usually in a normal year, we would get COLA or cost of living adjustments to our budget. However, this year, due to the pandemic, the best we can hope for is flat funding, and we got that. In addition, the final budget provide additional funding to the special education program. For many, many, many years, both the federal and state governments have underfunded this program, and this is a step in the right directions. If they were to underfunded the program by just say from 1 to 100, this would made it up to 3%. So they still have a long way to go to fully fund this program, but it's a step in the right directions because this program is severely underfunded by both the federal and state government. The final budget also reduces the CalSTRS and CalPERS rates. Just for your information, these are the pension system for school district employees. CalSTRS are for certificate employees, and CalPERS is for classified employees. And normally, it was scheduled to go up. The rate that the district contributed to the systems were scheduled to go up, but the governor proposal and the final state budget act actually reducing the rate for school districts. So we actually experiencing a saving there. On top of that, we share with the one-time CARES Act money, federal funds of $5.3 billion for learning loss mitigation. The $5.3 billion for all school districts in California, and it is estimated that ABC portion is about 11.8 or $12 million of that money, and I'll talk more about that. Not only that, because of the fluid situations for the current year with COVID-19, the state also holds harmless the ADA or the average daily attendance for this year for school districts. So we can use last year's ADA, for funding purposes. So that would hold us harmless because they understand that some parents or families may be reluctant to enroll their students in school and during this time. In order for the state to do that, they have to defer about $12 billion into the 21-22 school year. Deferrals means that it's not a cut, it deferrals. We get the cash or the money later. So normally you would get $1 in March. Now you'll get it until November of the following year, as an example. So they defer about $12 billion of that. It's going to be about $32 million for ABC that we don't get in the current year, but we will get that in the out year or next year. So it will create a cash flow issue for us. And I'll talk more about that too, because you get the money later from the state, but your expenditures, your invoices, your payroll, you still have to pay on time. So it's going to create a little cash flow problem when you get the cash later. So a lot of school districts this year will have to borrow or issue something called tax and revenue anticipation notes to cover payroll because they just don't have enough cash on hand. This is almost like similar to the IOUs of the past year under Governor Wilson era, if you remember that. Next slide, please. So this is the pension rate I was sharing with the board, the CalSTRS and the CalPERS rate. So in the current year, in CalSTRS, actually last year in 2019-20, the rate was 17.1%, and that's the first column there. It was scheduled to go up to 2021 to 18.4%. So as you can see, it was scheduled to go up by about 1.3%. However, instead of going up to 18.4%, now the new rate is 16.15%. So that's the saving that the district will realize, that instead of 18.4, it's 16.15. And the same thing on the right side with CalPERS. Last year, the district paid 19.7 into the pension system. It was scheduled to go up by 3% to 22.7, but because of the governor buyout down of the rate, it's scheduled to go up by only 1% to 20.7%. So CalPERS, it's still going up from 19.7 to 20.7, but it's not as as high as what we thought which is 22.7%. Next slide, please. So this is the cash deferrals that I was sharing with the board. So these are the $1 billion, but normally that we would receive in the top is what we normally would receive. And now it get pushed out into next year. So usually we would receive an installment in February of $1.54 billion. And now it got pushed down to November of 2021. So that's 9 months later. And another installment, we get, monthly apportionment from the state. So the March apportionment get pushed out to October, the April get pushed out to September, the May get pushed out to August, and the June get pushed out to July. So collectively, it's about $12 billion of cash that get pushed out into the out years. And as you can see here, if you were running your personal finance, you don't get paid in time, but you still have to pay your mortgage or your rent, in time. So that will create, an off balance or cash flow issue. Next slide, please. This is the same graphic that explained the same thing. It's a different graphic rather. So it just cash get deferred from 1 year over to the next. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about the CARES Act and the $12 million that the district expect to receive. The governor used 3 pots of money to allocate funds to school districts using 3 different funding formulas. So as you can see, when they set money and allocate it to school district, depends on how they choose to allocate the money. It makes a difference in how school district receive it. Sometimes it create, I don't want to use the term winners and losers, but it's not proportionate or it's not equitable. Depends on how you see it. So the state, based on the final negotiation and compromise, used 3 different allocation method to allocate the federal money to school district. The first method is using the student with disabilities, and that's the SWDs. That's what you see there, funding about $1,900 per student with disability in school district. So that's one allocation formula. The second allocation formula is based on the amount that school district receive under the supplementals and concentration grants. So the more supplemental and concentration grants that district currently have, the more federal money that you will be receiving. And the third allocation formula is based on the total LCFF funding for school districts. So this is more ADA driven. So as you can see, through much negotiations, there's finally 3 allocation formula. There's one change from the May revision, and that's a big change that really helped ABC, is the middle one. Initially, the $2.8 million was only going to school district with concentration grants. And that's mean those districts that 55% or above of unduplicated pupil percentage, we're at 54.5. So we barely made that mark. So we were not expected to receive any money in the middle portion, but with the final negotiation, they include supplemental grants. So we ended up receiving more than we anticipated with the final budget act. Next slide, please. So the federal money, as I share with the board, is restricted. And it is restricted to be spent not only by December 30th, but must be spent under these 4 bullets or boxes or categories, if you will. And I'm not going to read it for you, but I'm just going to share with you just briefly. One is learning support for students. That's the top bucket. The second is to use the money to increase either the instructional minutes or the instructional days for students. You can also use the money to provide additional academic services for students, such as devices for students, connectivity for students, and the additional instructional materials that students might need to support them. So all of that would be allowable expenditures, devices to keep them safe so they could learn should we have in-person learning. And the last item would be additional student support, such as counseling or mental health services or professional development for teachers, so that they can, do better, especially under the virtual world, so they can be better in terms of delivering instructional methods to students. So those are the 4 restricted categories that the money must be spent under. Next slide, please. So with that, with the 3 different allocation method, the total amount that the district is expected to receive is about $11.8 million. This is much better news than the May revision, because we were not expecting any of this money. So what is the recommended usage of this money? Again, I keep repeating myself, but this money must be spent by December 30th. So if you recall, the board at the budget adoption adopted a budget reduction plans that would have 4 furlough days, would implement 4 furlough days, which usually they would be the professional development days for teachers. So we are recommending using the federal money to restore the PD days for teachers. And not only that we're going to restore those 4 days, we're going to provide additional PD days, up to 5 PD days to teachers and support staff if they need to. And within this provisions, also any associated costs that the teachers or support staff may incur as a result of the virtual learning environment. So that would be covers under the $3.2 million here. We have on Wednesday under our virtual academy an asynchronous days for students. So we will provide extra support for students that would need extra support on Wednesday, and the recommendation here is about $1.7 million set aside to do this. We will be providing additional tutoring to students who need them, or childcare support for low-income families using this federal money, and it is $1 million. We are looking into something rewarding for students on Saturday, whether it's an arts or a boot camp, something enrichment for them as a rewarding for them after a week long of virtual learning. It's something fun for them to look forward to on Saturday. We also require to provide additional instructional materials and supply to students, as I share with the board. Not only that in the virtual world that we'll be sending supplies home to students and to families who need them. When they come back, there's a lot of things that they were able to share in the past because of, to keep them safe, we were not able to share supplies or materials. So we will be spending another $500,000 to provide additional instructional materials and supplies to students. Also, all the PPE, the personal protective equipment needs for students to keep them safe, and staff, from mask to gown to thermal scan to plexiglass. So those are the items under here that we will be spending about $800,000 of the federal money for that. And of course, additional technology needs for staff and students. The law requires to make sure that the students have a device to learn virtually, and connectivity, such as hotspots and other connectivity that the district we must provide to students. So we are setting aside $800,000 for that. This is on top of our normal TIP funding that we use to refresh devices for our school. And under the virtual world, we have pledged and agreed to eliminate combination classes so that our teachers can carry the instruction out easier now that they don't have to worry about, having teaching 2 curriculum with 2 different grade levels virtually. So now there will not be combination classes in the 2021 school year. And this is only pertaining to this year. All this expenditure is one time, using the one-time money. So one of the questions is obvious here is that what do we do after December 30th? While some of these supports carry on for the entire year, at that time, we will be using the general fund money to support our students to the end of the school year when the federal money runs out. Now, of course, we are also hoping on the next stimulus package coming from the federal government, should they can come to an agreement, and that may bring in additional federal funding for school district. But our plan, so that would be one plan. The second plan would be using the general fund to support our students for the current year. Next slide, please. This is just a quick snapshot for the board because we have been declining. It is projected to the entire state of California that enrollment for K-12 students will be declining in the foreseeable future through the year 2027, 2028. So this could kind of follow ABC pattern where we have been seeing declining enrollment, not just ABC, but all surrounding districts are experiencing declining enrollment in terms of number of students. Next slide, please. So in terms of the LCFF or the general fund budget now, outside of the federal money that I just shared with the board. So if you remember back in June, the cut here was about $10 million that the board have to address. Now, because of the flat funding doesn't mean that we have the same funding, right? We still have to make adjustment for things like declining enrollments and other loss of revenues because of the cash deferrals and because of the situation that we in. So even with flat funding, and I'm not gonna go through this item by item because you've seen this before, the district still about $2 million. If you go to the very bottom line, line number 12, we will get about $2 million less in revenues compared to previous year. So, how do I explain that when you say flat funding? Flat funding doesn't mean same funding, right? Like I shared with the board, it has to be adjusted for things like declining enrollment, other compensations, health and benefits increase, step and column costs. So all those programs and all the expenditures, when it's all said and done, we are expecting about $2 million less than last year. Now, this is much better than what you've seen in June, which was about $9 million. So this is a huge improvement in the district finances from June to now. Next slide, please. So this is the restoration plan that we have shared with the board in June, because at the time we informed the board that if the cuts did not materialize or did not as severe as the governor proposal, we will restore most of these cuts. So the good news is that, with the flat funding from the state, we able to restore most of the cuts and only maintain about $2 million in cuts that we need to keep the district balance, the district budget balance in the current year. So the first column here is what the board approved in June, $8.9 million in cuts. The second column is what we, for tonight, we will restore. So basically all positions that was proposed to be eliminated will be restored. And I want to say this publicly, we have been able to work with our labor partners that the district will not lay off any permanent employees during this financial crisis. So no permanent employees will get laid off, and we have been able to restore most of the programs. So let me talk real quickly about the ones that we defer and did not restore. So out of that, on line 7 is we restoring, if you remember, we proposed to eliminate 3 TOSA positions. These are the APs at the larger elementary schools. We will be restoring 2 of those and propose to not to restore 1. However, with that one, we may move another administrator to that school to help with the principal with that school. So that school will still get support from the district. We will not hire certain administrative positions just yet because we open virtually. So we are reviewing all open positions and we will hire them as needed. So again, we will not eliminate any positions, but we will focus on strategic hiring and hire them back as needed. You know, there will be much more support and needs when students come back, but right now, because we will start school virtually, we may not need certain positions just yet. So the music program, we will still have that, but we will incorporate that into the VAPA program in the LCAP. The deferred maintenance, the budget reduction was about $1 million. The recommendation here is to reduce it, to restore it, $500,000. So we only need to reduce it $500,000. So we are still contributing about $1.5 million to the deferred maintenance programs. And in that fund, there's about $5 million in the fund balance. So we are still moving forward with all the deferred maintenance projects. So we are not delaying any project at this point. The Tracy Infant Center, I want to talk about that because that was also the recommendation back in June was to incorporate that and restructure that and move that into the LCAP. So we are restructuring that program. That program will be operating with 2 teachers to serve all ABC students, teen parents. Not only ABC students, but we are able to serve teen parents from outside the district. It's just not serving adults at this point. So we are moving it back to the original intent of the Teen Parents Program is to support teen parents in ABC and outside of ABC. And we have sufficient capacity to serve all those students. And once students is in the program, just say if they are a senior in high school and if they have an infant and they're in the program, even if they graduate from ABC and become an adult, once you're in the program, you will be in the program until your infant age out, which is at age 2. So so that will be a saving there of $280,000. So all in all, if you look at line item 1 to 15, and at the last column is the revised cut, we are still reducing expenditures by $2 million to offset the $2 million, about $2.1 million in reductions in revenues, as you see before. So the district budget for the current year, the general fund budget, will be balanced. As you remember, in June, we were spending down about $4.4 million in fund balance. But with this revision, we will have a balanced budget. We will not need to tap into the $4.4 million. Having said that, however, as I share with the board, should the federal money runs out after December 30th, and if we need to spend general fund money to support our students, we will do that and we will bring it back to the board, another revision if we need to do that. At this point, we are hoping that we don't need to, but should we need to, we will bring that back to the board. Next slide, please. So this is the budget in terms of dollar and cents. I will not spend a lot of time on this because you've seen this since last week. The first column is what the board approved. And as you can see, in June, the total revenues for the unrestricted general fund was $182.4 million. But now, because of the flat funding, it's now $197.6 million. So we were able to restore, or the state restore, $15.2 million of that. Now, about a lot of that will be deferred into the future years, and I share this with the board. So because of the restorations in the revenues, we will restore all the cuts, or most of the cuts that the board approved. And therefore, if you look at the second column where it say budget revision, where it say net change in fund balance, we will have an increase of about $75,000 to the fund balance. So essentially, we will not need to spend down to $4.4 million, as you can see there, but rather we will have a balanced budget for the unrestricted general fund. Next slide, please. With the restricted general fund, the $11.8 million in federal revenues that you can see here. So that is the CARES Act, and of course we will have to spend it based on what we share with the board. So this is 11.8 in federal revenues and 11.8 in expenditure. So this program, again, have a net change of 0. So we will not be deficit spending in the restricted program either. Next slide, please. So this is your combined revenues and expenditure for the year. As you can see here, in June, the total revenues was $224 million. Now it is at $251 million. That is because of the restoration of the cuts and the one-time federal money. And accordingly, expenditures also have gone up from $226.9 million to $249.2 million. So instead of having a negative $4.4 million in the general fund, now it becomes a positive $75 million. So I want to repeat this again. Once again, we will have a balanced budget for the current year. Next slide, please. That's actually the end of my presentation. I just want to share with the board that what the state did is basically deferring a lot of difficult decisions into future years. You know, you heard the term kicking the can down the road. They did just exactly that. The state did not receive any additional revenues from the Fed or from tax collections, but yet they were not able to restore a lot of cuts to school district. The mechanism in doing that is basically by deferring a lot of cash into out years and just keep delaying the problem into the future years. So are we out of the woods yet? No. We just basically get flat funding for this year, but the situation may come back next year and there could be potentially additional cuts into the out years. Again, the state might choose to deferral again into the future years and keep doing that. The last time they did this was in 2008 with the Great Recessions, and it took them about 6 years to pay back everything. So we are looking at deferrals, at least in the foreseeable future for the next 5 to 6 years. That is the end of my presentation, Dr. Su and Dr. Rios.
Thank you so much. At this time, I will go down the list and call for board comments. So we'll start with Vice President Mendoza.
No questions, no comments. Thank you, Madam President.
Board Clerk Yu.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Tuan, I have to say, great job. Thank you so much for actually working with the budget cut when we had the budget cut. That was tough, you know, but today is good news because we have extra fund to work with. And I am very pleased to see that this extra fund, which our district has, and it's specifically for the learning loss mitigation, is going to be used for the learning loss mitigation. And just want to point out that since I got on board 7 years ago, the campaign was to close the gap. And we did that. We did accomplish close the gap. We did. And I know that I appreciate our President Olga Rios mentioned about the equity very often. And we are working towards that, our district is. And one of my biggest concern is when we have pandemic, the most vulnerable group, the lower socioeconomic group, where the parents are essential workers and the children are left at home, they really do need a lot of support, as well as, of course, the entire district, the students, it's a struggle. But because we have this learning loss mitigation with the CARES Act, I am very pleased to see that this is going to be used towards supporting our students, the extra tutoring, maybe physical education, sports clubs, music band. I know we talked about it on our last board session that some of these things can be, can happen. And I would really like to see these things roll out in, many of our, schools to support the students. That the learning loss, we have this extra funding coming from the government because they understand that many students will have learning loss. And we need to support these students with tutoring. So I'm really looking forward to some of the details of how this will roll out. And question for Dr. Su is, who would be the person who will be in charge of rolling this out?
In terms of the learning loss piece?
Yes,
So
how this will be implemented.
well, we have a number of different strategies that many
Mhm.
of them who are experiencing some challenges,
Mhm.
we have support for them on Wednesdays,
Mm-hmm.
where they will be
Okay.
asynchronously learning on
Mhm.
Wednesday. We have support for English learners, for
Mhm.
low-income families, and so it will be provided on Wednesdays.
Wednesdays only. How about the additional after-school tutoring and the child care support? Will any of this fund be used to support where the students need child care? Remember, we did have that presentation last week,
Yeah,
8 to 4.
yes. I'm going to let Dr. Mayfield
Mhm.
respond to that.
Thank you, Dr. Sue. In September, I will be bringing to the board our learning continuity and attendance plan. And in that plan, we address specifically how we are responding to learning loss or learning mitigation. As Dr. Sue indicated, Wednesday is definitely one of our focus days to support students. But in addition to Wednesday, there's also support built into the instructional day for both elementary and middle school age students. And so we were very intentional in our model to try to have those resources built into the school day so that students would not have to extend their learning beyond the regular scheduled time. And so I'll speak more specifically about the various structures and the systems of supports that will be provided for our students at the September the 8th board meeting.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dr. Valencia. Thank you. That is all.
Thank you. Next, we have Dr. Apodaca.
Thank you, Madam President. Really quick, I'm going to have to respectfully disagree as the trustee from Hawaiian Gardens. We're nowhere near closing the gap. I think we've made great strides, but based off of our very upward trend with the dashboard, California dashboard, there still remains a gap, particularly amongst our lower income African American, Mexican American foster and students who are considered wards of the state. But I agree, we're making great strides. I think we're doing more than many other districts. So I would respectfully disagree that we've closed the gap. I think we have much work to do. With regards to the revisions, I wanted to ask, I just wanted to make sure that the public knows, and Tuan, can you please confirm that by law required to submit a balanced budget to the state, is that correct?
So, yes, sir. I'll try to answer. So we are allowed to go into the deficit if we need to. The state would like to see a balanced budget, but you have to have a fund balance to cover it. What you can't go under is the 3% reserve. So
Right.
each year, if we really need to, and that's what the fund balance is for, right? If you need to make some difficult decisions and try to save jobs and not to cut a lot of programs, you're going to spend down some of your fund reserve. You can't do that. But what you can't do legally is spend down below the 3% reserve. But with this budget revision,
Okay. I'm glad you mentioned. Go ahead.
We do have a balanced budget with this revision, should the board approve it tonight.
Good. And also our reserves, our surplus is healthy. What percentage are we at as of right now?
Yes, sir. We are at 10%, which is about $22 million in reserve.
Okay. And I'm glad you mentioned saving jobs. You did put quite a bit of emphasis to the point where I noticed where you said permanent employees. My concern is I don't think many folks understand the difference between a permanent employee and a non-permanent employee or temporary employee in our school districts. Can you give us examples of non-permanent employees and what, if any, impact this has had on them and their livelihoods?
So I'm going to use a teacher, for example. So that would be, so our teachers, if they were to replace a regular teacher, then usually they hire on a more permanent basis. However, if they were to replace someone that either we use categorical money to pay for them, or someone's out on loan, or someone is out on leave. So by nature of the needs of the district, temporary employees usually employ for 1 year, only if we have the need again. So we evaluate all temp employees, even without budget cuts, on an annual basis to see if the need's still there, and we can offer to renew their contract if we still have the needs. A lot of the temporary employees start out with temp, but then ultimately becomes permanent employees because of the needs to have them in a permanent positions. But that would give district one flexibility, because either the nature of the funding is not there permanently, or because of the needs are not there. Same thing with classified employees. Sometimes we would have a paraeducator that we have just a need for the 1 year to support special education students. The need may not be there in the following year. So we evaluate that, and we will, make a decisions on whether to have the same needs in the following year.
So I guess what I'm trying to get at, and again, I have to emphasize for the public, and I definitely understand what we're trying to do with less, right? And what we're able to provide, because we are at the mercy of the state, funding formula, and enrollment. So I guess what I'm trying to get at, my question here is, compared to any other year historically, the last 5 years, has this impacted those who are non-permanent or who are considered temporary, who normally would be here for 1 year or 2 years, but we're not renewing their contracts due to COVID? Are we doing that? Is it any more prevalent now than it was in, say, the last 5 years since we've recovered from the Great Recession?
The answer is no, not because of financial reasons. We are doing that on a normal program reason, but not because of financial reasons.
It's to meet staffing needs and make sure that we actually have what we need. It's not because we can't afford them.
Correct. So if we were normally have to adjust staffing because of declining in enrollment, we would do that regardless of the financial situation we're in. So we operate normally this year.
Okay, and then I've got 2 more questions, and the shortest answers that you can provide, because I don't want to take this time from my colleagues. The combination classes, with those being gone, does that mean then that we're going to be having a heightened staffing requirement? You have a second, third combo, we're splitting them up. Does that mean an increase in class size, or does that mean that we now have another teacher that we're bringing in to teach, the split off at 3rd grade and at 2nd grade?
It's the latter. So there will be no combination classes in the current year. So because of that, we do have to hire additional teachers to do that. So if anything, this is the year that we're actually hiring additional teachers than normally we would have because of that one particular item.
Okay, and final question, if I can get a concrete answer with this, because I know that this is of grave concern to many parents, as well as not to just us as a board, but I know for sure to Vice President Mendoza and myself as well, since we have schools that are dual immersion in our trustee areas. Dual immersion program, my understanding was it's going to be moving fully virtual, exactly the way, but does that mean that we're going to be having a dedicated full-time teacher similar to the typical monolingual, I guess I would say, classrooms, but we would just be having a dual immersion program fully in Spanish with the same teachers, with the same parents? I guess I want to get an understanding of going to be fully virtual as a program.
Yes, the dual immersion program will be provided in the virtual academy in a similar manner as if we were in a traditional school setting. And so the percentage of time that students spend during their school day learning in Spanish is the model that we will be using to support students learning in virtual academy. And so if there's language arts block,
perfect.
Okay.
So Dr. Apodaca,
thank you so much. All right, thank you, Madam President.
I want to add to that too. the NEMIS, the dual immersion program at NEMIS is a good example. So normally with combination classes, we would have 12 teachers there at NEMIS for that program. But because of our commitment to eliminate combination, we adding a teacher there, and we actually hiring one now. If you look at the vacancy opening on the district website, a dual immersion teacher for NEMIS just for this particular reason. So we're adding one teacher at NEMIS in the dual immersion program to eliminate combination classes than we would normally have.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam President. That's all I have. Thank you, Tuan. Thank you, Dr. Mayfield.
Thank you. Next, may I, oh, hold on, I lost my screen. Okay. Oh. Okay, you can hear me. I wasn't sure if my mic was on or not. Next, can we please hear from Mr. Law?
Thank you, Madam President. Some questions for Tuan. On the deferrals system, do we sign a contract with the state to do this, or is it just sort of happens?
Now we at the mercy of the state. They're gonna tell us how much money we getting and when we getting it. So there's no contract between the district and the state. So what they actually do is they're gonna give us a schedule of payments. So they say normally you would get, you know, this much money by this time, but because of the deferrals, you're not gonna get it in the current year. You're gonna get a lot of it in the out year. So we'll get a revised schedule. So normally, Mr. Law, if you will get a stipend on a monthly basis, so now you don't get that. You'll get half a stipend this 1 year month, and then you get the other half 6 months later. So that would be an example. So they would be telling us what is the payment schedule is going to be, and we would just have to take that and thank them for that because of the flat funding, they have to do that. So it's not a contract or anything. It just they tell us when we're going to get the money.
Was this a similar process to 2008?
Yes, they have done this. They have used this financial tool before.
Next question. If in some kind of miracle happens here and we find a vaccine and we change our school system, will this budget hold up, or do we need to come back and redo the budget if we're suddenly going to be doing the 3 and 2 version that we had before?
If and when the state tell us that our schools are safe to reopen in person, we will have additional needs. We will modify that, and that's why back to a question from Dr. Apodaca, that we do have about $22 million in reserve, or 10%, that we can dip into that should we need to ensure that our students have the support they need in the current year. And the intent of the state is very clear, learning loss mitigation. So we will do that. And I'll bring it back to the board. If you remember annually, you see the first interim report in December and the second interim report in March. So I would have 2 more chances to take back any additional revisions to the board should we need to.
One last question. I know we're still nearly 2 weeks plus before we are actually starting school. Do you have any feeling yet about where we stand in terms of the students returning or not returning, or how we're going to look? And I know you say we're going to lose 170, but we don't really know what we're going to do.
It's actually 2 week minus. It's not 2 week plus. It's Tuesday already. If you remember, our 7th grader coming back on the 21st, I think, on Friday before that. So it's 10 days for them, 10 calendar days. So thank you for the question. We monitor this on a daily basis between now and school start with all of our schools. The rollover are pretty consistent, meaning that, going from 1st to 2nd, 2nd to 3rd, 3rd to 4th. Where we are really monitoring now is the K and the TK. So naturally, we were expecting some decline already because of lower birth rate, but because of COVID-19 and where we in, we see a more drastic decline in kindergarten and TK programs that we have to collapse certain classes, and it's expected because if you have a 5 years old now, you may want to hold up on enrolling your kids until things are safer. The good news for this year is that the state can hold us harmless. So we will be okay for the 1 year. But next year, when hopefully things are back to normal, like you said, then we would have to play catch up and really ramp up our enrollment and enroll students back to normal. Normally, we would get about 1,200 kindergartens. This year, as of today, I'm seeing it just a little bit more than 1,000. So it's lower than normal. And like I said, some of it is expected, but some of it is for surely because of COVID-19.
I don't know if you've been able to do this, but can you kind of determine whether people are leaving because they want to go to some district that has the other kind of education, or do they want to come here because we know what we're doing?
That would be the latter. It's not the former for sure. So in all seriousness, you know, families move out for different reasons, but I have never been told it's because of our academic program. You know, whether it's housing mostly or jobs, they have, you know, jobs outside this area, they have to move, or housing mainly. But you know, our programs offerings is top notch. So I haven't heard a family that at least tell us, you know, honestly, that they moving because they're not happy with the quality of our instructional program.
I think we've heard so much over the last few board meetings about people being upset that it's not full-time school, that I just want to know if that had an effect on people wanting to transfer out to someplace that is a full-time in-class operation. You probably can't tell that. Huh?
Yeah, but unless you're a private school or charter school, and they may have different rules, but my understanding is that the entire Orange County and LA County is still on the list, on the watch list by the state. So therefore, they cannot, unless they apply for a waiver, have instructional programs or reopen schools in person. So
LA County is doing no waivers, is that correct?
Correct. So the entire Los Angeles County, every single school district have to open remotely or virtually.
One last question. You talked about the ADA kind of situation where we're hold harmless. Do we still do something with ADA, or is this something we're counting?
It's actually a legal requirement that we do daily, daily, I want to repeat that, interactions with students and taking attendance daily. So we have to treat that part like our normal school. Kids, we take attendance daily. If they're not there, if they tardy, we mark that. If they're not there, we would have to follow up, you know, on why they're not showing up to school virtually. And if after, you know, 3 days, it'll become a truancy. So we have to treat all that normal as if they were in person.
So the teacher is a little more than a teacher now. It's an attendance clerk also checking on the students, whether they're there or not there.
All that's still the same. Teacher, you know, normally take daily attendance of their students, and they will report the attendance to the office, and the office will follow up normally, you know, if students not there. So all the support system is there, whether taking daily attendance or follow up with families is the same this year.
That's it. Thanks, Juan. Did a great job.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we have Board Member Nishi.
Hi, thank you, Madam President. A few questions regarding the hold harmless. It's hold harmless for the 2021 school year, but we're budgeting $1 million for declining enrollment. Why do we get $1 million less for declining enrollment for hold harmless?
Actually, it was from last year. So good point. So this year, the state funding is always a year in arrear in terms of ADA if you're declining. So in 1920, we were down 170 students from 1819. So it's impact our current, you know, the current year. But the per student funding is the same. The whole harmless will be for next year. The 170 students declining is in 2019, 2020.
Okay, thank you. So we're gonna restore the sports stipend, so that's great. But are we gonna have any sports the first semester? What are they gonna do? I mean, we could have sports, but it's gonna be looking different, right? Are we gonna try to do that?
Dr. Sue, I think I'm going to ask Dr. Weiss or Dr. Mayfield to answer that.
Well, let me just jump in real quickly. There'll be no competitions in this
Okay.
first semester until probably December, but as most of you all know, we have holidays in December, so most likely it'll be January.
But I mean, we're paying them a stipend still.
So let me answer that. If they were still to do the work, if we were allowed to have training or conditioning, if the coach is still going to do the work, then we're still going to pay them. We will not only will make that determination, just say throughout the whole semester when the counties tell us that you can't even do any kind of training or conditioning, then there was really nothing was done. And of course, we don't pay the stipend. But there could be no competition or no games, but if they were still working with our students for training and conditioning, then we will honor that and pay them the stipend.
Okay. Yeah.
If I may also, they have moved the sports seasons purposefully. So they didn't eliminate them, they just moved them. So we will still have all of them if things go well, but it is moved.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure if we're restoring it that we are getting something for our money. That's all. That's important. So for example, our bus drivers, they're doing something else, and also our aides are doing something else during this particular time. I had a quick question. So our temporary employees, that's our adult school teachers, right? And the temporary employees, you're saying that's a paraeducator as well, the kids that help the special ed kids? Is that correct?
Yeah, so for any classification, we have permanent employees and we have temporary employees. So the adult school, not all of them are temporarily. There's some status permanent employees. Same thing with paraeducators. Most of our paraeducators, or a good percentage, are permanent. There are those that, you know, it based on needs on an annual basis. So this year, we did not make any decisions financially on those programs. We may make it based on needs. If we still need them, we will hire them back.
Okay, so you're saying that some of the adult school teachers are permanent. They're not temporary. Because I remember we used to send a letter to them on an annual basis saying basically, you know, the legal letter that we need to send. So you're saying that some of them, what percentage of them are permanent? What percentage of them are temporary in the adult school?
Dr. Zidlow, you want to try that?
Sure. I don't have the exact percentage right here with me. I can get that to you. But we do have what we call status teachers. These are teachers that teach a set number of hours that would be considered full-time. And they run typically our programs in our English learner programs, our citizenship. And then we do have programs where they're more of our career technical ed or the community-based programs. And so depending, sometimes the teachers are not permanent. They're teaching oil painting, or they're teaching something that's more of a community-based class. And then you have other classes that are things where where students are earning their high school diploma or earning their citizenship. And so I can get you the actual percentages this week in the notes that come out.
I'm not playing like 1,000 questions. I'm not here to catch anybody, but like the nursing program, are those the temporary or are they the permanent?
It depends on how many hours they are working in that program. So sometimes we have staff who teach in our adult school and they will teach in multiple adult schools. And so because of that, they're not permanent with us. They're temporary with us, and they're temporary at other places as well.
Okay, so would most of our career technical, would they be mostly temporary or mostly permanent? Or, I mean, I'm just kind of ballpark.
Are we talking adult school, CTE?
Adult school.
I would have to look at the details of the hours for that.
Okay. And that program sort of pays for itself through the fees that we have, right? So that's not is that included in our budget here?
So yeah, it will be in the adult school budget. Yes. So the adult school run 3 programs. One is fee-based, like you said, like the oil painting or whatever, that they collect a fee. It's not fully fee, right? We still subsidize some of it, but mostly fee. One are the programs like the English learners and the ESL and citizenship we get state funding for that. And we get some federal funding under the WEIR program for the adult school.
But that's not reflected in this budget, right?
No, it's
Okay,
all in the adult school
then,
budget.
then that's going to come later on. I don't have to ask that question now. All right. So it looks like before we had 2 million budget from federal funds this year, 2 million next year, and now they want us to spend 12 million by December. Am I right?
That is correct.
Okay, just checking. So I am wondering, and if we don't spend it by December, it goes back to the federal government.
It goes back to the state, yes.
So here's where I'm wondering about. So technology is going to be really, really important. And I know you budgeted $800,000, and I know we have some decent Wi-Fi, but so this Wi-Fi could last for more than just 1 year. It could last for several years. I really don't know how fast the internet that we have is, but I'm hoping that we can potentially budget more for the technology for the Wi-Fi, because I think that, I mean, even we paying for our internet, we have these little glitches here and there. So that may be an issue. And also I'm wondering, there's 75,000 that we have in a little bit extra money. Can we provide a little bit more support for the parents in terms of technical support? Some of our parents may not be able to figure out how to do this online. I know the kids are good at it, but maybe for the kinders and the 5-year-olds, is there a way we can really put more emphasis and more resources into that parent technical support?
Yes, and actually it's a requirement. We're gonna have a full, it's not just the 75,000 under the adult school. We're gonna have a lot of PD for parents as well. So I know you mentioned it last week also. So we will make sure that our parents will have the PD that they need to help their students to be successful under the adult school. So that will come out of that budget. So we don't have to worry about it here. So that's number one. To answer your question regarding the infrastructure of our Wi-Fi, we are planning under Measure BB. If you recall, there's fundings in there for technology and upgrading the entire district from 1 gig to 10 gig. So the capacity is going to be 10 times more than what we have now. And that will be sufficient. That will take us way into the future in terms of bandwidth.
So 10 gigs is considered a lot?
10 times what we have now, yes. 1 gig right now, it's sufficient for what we need right now, for the most part. And going 10 times with the current bandwidth, yes, 10 gig. If you ask anyone, any public agency, K-12, that's more than sufficient.
Okay, because this has got to last us for a while. All right.
Yes, sir.
Well, I trust you in that. All right. I think that's it. Thank you very much, Juan. One more question regarding the federal funds. So if federal funds come, do you think that might, and I know this is looking to a crystal ball, do you think that might eliminate that issue of deferral?
No, because one-time federal funds will just one time, and most of the time it's restricted. So it will, even if it eliminate the deferral, it will eliminate in the current year. Next year, they will have it again, because structurally, the term is a structural deficit. The state have a structural deficit, meaning that they are spending more than what they take in. So therefore, they have to resort to this deferrals mechanism. Unless they're going to keep getting one-time money every year, like we used to have under Governor Brown, we keep getting one-time money every year. The problem is not going to solve itself until their tax revenues start coming back to the pre-COVID-19. Federal money won't solve it. Yeah, it's just a one-time solution.
No, I understand that the federal monies are a one-time solution, but I'm wondering, and obviously it depends on annual budget and revenues and things like that, but if it's a shallow recession, then it might be able to help with the deferrals, because the deferral business is crazy. It's
correct.
I'm going to pay you next week, and if they just paid us now with the federal funds, I would feel more comfortable because I know that next year you're going to have a little bit more money because you didn't defer it for next year. But yeah, you don't have as much money because you don't have any taxes. I get that. Anyway,
Correct. Correct.
We'll deal with it when we get it. That's
Yes,
just
sir.
for the future. Thank you very much. Thank you very
You're
much.
Board Member Say.
Hi, Tuan. First, I want to welcome Mr. Baca here today. I really appreciate it. You know how much we need you all the time, but unfortunately we cannot. So our budget money is towards the student and the teachers. Tuan, I have a question on page slide 7. Okay. I know this one-time flight money. I'm really glad we are trying to be distributed as even as fair to all for parents, teachers, and students' needs. I have a question about this learning loss mitigation. Number 2, it says, I mean, by the government say we can increase the number of instruction minutes of day. That would require the contract, right? Negotiation, am I right?
That is correct.
So that I guess we might have some go towards that way. Am I right?
So not in the budget I present, just so you know that our instructional days, it would be 180 days. That's the legal requirement. But our instructional minutes is above the state legal requirement.
That's right. So, and when you say layoff, we're talking about no layoff, the permanent, which is full-time or part-time person. That's the whole thing. That's what
Both. Yes, ma'am. Both.
Next one, I hate to talk about that, but I think we needed to on page 9. Yeah. And board member Law had mentioned about the declined student issue there. I do think as we're looking at the 2001, you go back to the 2001, 01 to 02, you can see as 2020-21, and we predicting eventually the student decline will get worse and worse. Do we have any plan that? It seems to go so fast right now. We are, I mean, since I've been in board here, we're really trying to maintain 20,000 students. Now we're down to 19,000 and then get less and less. What is your plan? Do you have anything look into it? Are we going to have ad hoc to look into this issue? Because we had the demography report before.
So thank you for the question. So this is statewide data or ABC. You're right. The board did commission Davis Demographic to conduct a demographic study of the district, and they did project it out that in the next 7 years we will be declining. So we will evaluate that on an annual basis, and of course, when the timing is right, then we will bring to the board recommendations. If we need to regarding facilities with regard to that, but we will monitor that. And you're right, we still hovering around 20,000 students, and we're doing fairly better than surrounding district. We're declining, but it's not at the same rate as surrounding districts. So we still hold on to our students and attract students from outside the district.
I'm so glad when you mentioned not laying out the full permanent people, but I also want you to consider that. Be careful, we keep hiring the people when we have declined the students. Since we probably don't want to lay off the people, but again, here your students are declining that we need to look into that for the future. I like to staff to working on that, see what can we help on this decline issue for the 2021. We really need to focus on that. That's my goal for this, the slide number 9. Okay. Now, go back to the slide number 11. Okay. And number 6. Okay. When you're talking about a lot of things we restore back, the classroom size still remain the same.
Thank you for the question. Yes, we are not increasing class size. We are restoring that back, that one item. So kindergarten through 3rd, the class size will not go up. Not only that we restore that, we also put in additional federal money to eliminate combination classes. So thank you for the question. We did not increase class size at kindergarten through 3rd. We restored that completely.
The computer, the laptop we provide to the student, you know how children are at home, and if they broke the computer, what is the process that we're doing right now to help what do we do with them when the school starts? If the computer is broken or iPad is broken.
Yeah, so we have a plan in place. We will first of all, we will replace it for them immediately. So they have a device to log in to avoid any learning loss, and we will repair them as we need them. We need to. So we set aside budget about a 10% allotment for broken or lost devices. So we budget for that, and the key here is to ensure that our students always have a device and connections to ensure that they can log in every day.
Are we sending a letter to the parents and make sure the laptop they have at home right now is working? Because we only have how many weeks left? 2 weeks left now. Am I right? So are we sending a letter to them to follow up how the laptop is working or not working during when prepare for the school start?
Every school is handling this differently. However, we know that before school start, the week before school start, all school would have a plan to ensure that parents have a chance to pick up devices if they need to for next year. So we are looking at the week of the 17th will be, most schools will have, all schools will have a plan to ensure that parents can orderly come back and pick up devices. I think some schools already started this week. So we are, the key here is on the 24th, when we up and running, every student would have a device if they need one to ensure that to participate in the virtual learning.
Appreciate it. I just want to make sure we really follow that well, make sure all students have the device before the school start. I'm so glad, board member, you mentioned about childcare. We mentioned about parents. What about our own staff, teachers? They need childcare too. Do we have any budget for that? I know you have the $500,000 and 80 there for parents. Do we have anything for our teacher?
So let me let me answer it this way. There's a lot of question about childcare, right? Because the question we get is that if it's not safe enough to open school, why is it safe enough to open childcare? Right. And the state say that yes, it's safe to open childcare. And the childcare, the state provision is this: the priority, the intent of childcare is going to first responder, essential workers, first responder, and healthcare workers. So those are the ones get the first priority, and our 4-fee program will support that. And then of course we have a free programs for families, for low-income families, because they also in needs of childcare. So we have 2 parallel programs to meet the intent of the state requirement. One is a full fee program or partial fee, subsidized fee program to help essential workers families, right? So that would be, again, the healthcare workers or the first responders. So that would be the first priority. Now, if we have space, we can expand it into other families if we have space for that. And then the other side of that would be all the low-income families, the families who want free and reduced price meals, and we would have some childcare for them too. And we know that with the program that we will be offering, the needs will far exceed what we can offer, but we have to balance, we have to take it slow and balance it between, the safety of the children, the staff and the students, when we offer that. So we want to make sure that we approach it slowly but safely.
Do you have, this is always one of the things, the project I like to get involved, for the flu shots. Coming on October 1st, we used to provide the flu shots for our students. Now COVID-19, everything shut down. Do we have any plan for that? So October is another season, the flu season coming out, and we have to protect our children too. Do you have any plan for that?
Let me jump in there, Tuan. I know that our nurses, we actually already opened our Burbank clinic to provide immunizations for our students.
Thank you very much. We probably need to really do some kind of let public can know about what program we have, so they can go there get flu shots. We can protect them. I mean, we can't protect COVID-19, but at least we can protect that they don't get that much upper respiratory infection disease on that. So student can still, attending visual class. And that will be my end of my question, President Olga. Back to you, the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. I also have a few, and the first thing I do also want to do is clarify comments by our board clerk, as was mentioned by Dr. Apodaca. That is our goal, is to close the achievement gap, but no, we're not there yet. Closing the achievement gap, I think, remains to be a challenge for most districts, and definitely true to ABC. And there remains a disparity in achievement of students based on ethnicity and income level among the two. Having said that, that's why we're here as board members, is to monitor and to ensure growth. And I think that our entire district and our schools see that as a priority and are working to, in fact, close the gap. The second thing is that it's a question, Tuan. I know that there's a push for school funding nationwide to start providing information about how funding is allocated by schools. Is that information that will be provided for this new money? Can we get a diagram of some kind or a list of how this money will be divided by schools?
Yes, I can send that to the board through Thursday notes.
Thank you. The third one is, we know the cuts are coming, right? And we're incredibly relieved that at least this year we won't have to deal with that on top of everything else. Is there anything that we as board members or we as a district can start to do to prepare for what's possibly the inevitable, which means reduced funding?
So yes, of course, you can advocate for more funding for schools. So the federal government is still in negotiations for the next stimulus package, and within that there should be some hopefully some funds for school districts. And like I share with Mr. Niishi, that's one-time funds, but we'll take one-time fund, right? It helped us get through the 1 year. So between the HEROES Act and the HEALS Act, or there will be something in between that, hopefully, when they come to their sense and have a compromise within that. Secondly, this November, since you asked the question, Proposition 15 is on the ballot, and that will bring in additional funds permanently for school districts. And Proposition 15 is the initiative that the voter will be in front of the voter to vote yes or no, to approve or not approve, and that will reassess larger business in terms of their property. So that hopefully would bring in additional funds. So there's many things you can do as board members. You can always advocate at the state level for additional funding for schools. You can advocate for supporting a Proposition 15, which is let the voters decide, and also additional funding from the federal government. So those are the things that you can do.
Thank you. And Dr. Su, can we look into seeing how, as a board, we can put that on our agenda to support Proposition 15?
We can do that. When do you want to place it on the agenda?
Oh gosh, it would have to be for next board meeting, the 8th. That's before the election.
Okay, no, that's not a problem.
Thank you. And what is the name escapes me. I know what you're talking about, Tuan. What is that proposition called?
Oh, I wish you didn't ask that. It's a long name. Something schools and community support. School first or something like that. It's a long name.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, with that, I am going to propose a 5-minute recess so that we prepare. Oh no, I'm sorry. We need to vote.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay, actually, I also skipped over the public comments for this agenda item, Madam Clerk.
Madam President, I do not have access to the public comment because it's all submitted. But starting next board meeting, when we follow the advice of Mr. Baca, I will have access to the public comments live. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. With that, roll call, please.
Yeah, do we have ready?
Dr. Apodaca?
Aye.
Mr. Law?
Aye.
Mrs. Mendoza?
Yes.
Mr. Nishii?
Yes.
Dr. Rios?
Yes.
Mrs. Say?
Yes.
Mrs. Yu?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Okay, now I would like to suggest a 5-minute recess so that we can lead on to our second half of our meeting. Is everybody okay with that?
Exercise.
Yes.
Okay, be back in 5 minutes, please.
Okay.
Okay, we can all come back now. Okay, Chris, you with us?
I am, Madam President.
Good, thank you. Okay, looks like everybody's back. I don't see Ernie. Let me scroll down. Ernie, are you with us? Agent Ernie.
Let me, oh, she's here. Let me find out what Sue, is Sue here?
I don't see her.
Okay, I'll text, I'll call her. Okay,
All right. So we're just waiting on Ernie.
Ernie's here.
Oh,
I'm here.
okay.
Okay.
So let's continue. At this time, we will move on to our informational item. The next item on the board is an advisory committee, social justice task force. And this item was also tabled from the August 14th, 2020 Board of Education meeting. And that is my item. So the events of recent times have brought to the forefront issues of inequities and racial injustices. And here at ABC, we're taking up the charge of moving forward and promoting a more fair system that affords everyone the same opportunities regardless of home environment or ethnicity. Today's agenda item is, or informational item is a step in the right direction. It will create a social justice committee, much like our other committees already in place. It prioritizes issues of equity and social justice. And the purpose of this committee is to take recommendations from, take recommendations to create and sustain practices and strategies so that all our students, families, and communities feel safe, included. Things like the celebration of diversity across our district, things like diversifying our teaching staff, things like exploring anti-racist programs, etc. So I hope that soon also we'll consider going one step further and a position or office to oversee equity specifically. We should not task our current district staff to do this. I think we have seen the benefits of creating a much needed position in recent times, such as our communication officer who detailed for us the extent of the amazing work he does on a regular basis and how our district is really better for it. The idea is not innovative or cutting edge. By the way, many of our surrounding districts have equity offices. Some have equity directors, while others have a TOSA, teacher on special assignment. Some were recently created and some were in place for some time. Some of the districts are just doing a quick Google search. West Linwood Unified has an equity, access, and instructional services office. LAUSD has an access, equity, and acceleration office. Long Beach Unified has an equity, access, college, and career readiness office. And our neighbor, Los Alamitos, has a human relations advisory council. So again, the time for action at ABC is now, and I hope to have your support on this item and in future actions. Thanks. This time we'll move to discussion. Vice President Mendoza.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I want to thank you for bringing this to the board. I'm in favor of it. Are we going to discuss right now how it's going to be made up? Discuss the type of person we want to hire for this position, or are we going to wait till action?
So this is an informational item, so we would have to put this on an agenda item for September 8th, and we could do both. We can put the committee and the formation of an actual office. Is that correct, Dr. Sue?
That is correct.
So following our board policy, the committee is going to be made up of who, Dr. Sue?
So the committee will be comprised of representatives of the Board of Education will be selecting. Just like any of our current standing committees.
So board members would be recommending?
Yes.
Okay, and then we'll also have representatives from each bargaining unit.
Yes.
And our schools. I really think that we need to have representation of our student population there.
We also have representatives from students on each of our board advisory committees already.
How many?
We have at least 2 for each group.
2 from each group. Okay, now I know we follow board policy, but I think for this committee, I think it's really important to have a little bit more representation from our student body. I don't think 2 is going to be enough. I think that we need to add maybe some more. I know we had many comments, not just high school. We had some from junior high even elementary. So I don't know elementary, but I'm definitely thinking we need to have high school and middle school represented on this committee. They need to have a say in how this is going to be played out. And I'm not sure if 2 student body representatives is enough for this committee. And also, I think we need to be very, how do I say it? The person that we're going to hire to take charge of this committee, this task force, I think we need to be also very cognizant of who that person is. So I'm in favor of this, and I would like to see it going to an action item for our next board meeting. That's it, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, give me 1 second. My son is knocking at the door. I don't know why. So 1 second, please.
Well, I think it's my turn. While we're waiting, okay, there she is.
Thank you. Sorry about that. He's getting home from practice and forgot his key. Okay, so we're good. Thank you. Next, let's have Board Clerk Yu.
Yeah, thank you. It so happens that the journal that we all received from NSBA has the issue that we're talking about tonight in one of their articles. And it says, Rodriguez says schools must provide training on institutional racism and implicit bias for staff so they can have a common understanding about how the 2 issues affect students of color. And in our ABC district, we are one of the most diverse community, most diverse district. Students, how many languages we have, Dr. Sue?
I'm sorry, we have over 45 different languages.
Yeah, we have over 45 different languages. And even among the Asians, we have the Korean, Chinese, Southeast Asian, the Hmong, Pacific Islanders, and even among the Latinos, we have Mexican, we have Central American, Argentina, Guatemala, El Salvador, Brazil. You know, it's just a broad, very broad. And I think that this is very timely to implement ethnic studies. And I know that our state has already implemented and have a curriculum set in place. And I think that it would be great to collaborate with what the state offers and adjust to our district's needs and integrate the ethnic studies into our curriculum to educate our children the history, part of the rich history that we are made up of, the immigrants, the contributions or the suffering that our, different ethnic groups have gone through. And I know that the legislator AB 2016 has the Alejo Pupil Instruction Ethnic Studies. And this bill encourages school districts to offer a standards-based ethnic studies curriculum. The legislation offers support for the inclusion of ethnic studies as a standalone elective or to be integrated into existing history, social science, and English language arts courses. And yeah, it's my strong belief that it starts with educating our children as young as elementary school about the different diverse culture and ethnicity to accept each other and to, for individuals who really know their roots and their identity and respect their roots, also have a respect for other ethnicity too. So I am very for this with adjustment in maybe what the focus is going to be. I would like to keep it very educational, informative, inspiring, and positive. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Next, we have Dr. Apodaca.
Thank you, Madam President. I wanted to commend you for putting this on there, and I wanted to put out there that we can throw everything, including ethnic studies. We can throw everything, including posters and curriculum at our students, at our teachers, at our stakeholders, One thing that I've learned this last year is that knowledge is not necessarily commensurate with action or with results. If that were the case, everybody walking around would have, very healthy vitals. Everybody walking around would have an 8-pack, and we wouldn't have to hire personal trainers because knowing what to eat and what not to eat would be enough. I think that having a task force, having a department that's actually committed to making sure that we have, implemented what we say we are going to implement is vital. It's important. I think that because knowledge isn't commensurate with results, it's my firm belief that accountability is, which is why we hire personal trainers, which is why we have people that'll come up and reinforce and reaffirm, right, the best practices and what works, and helping us avoid what doesn't. I guess what I would be very interested in seeing is who would we have, if this is an advisory committee, who would we have on it? And I'm glad that Vice President Mendoza mentioned having students. In some of the comments that were shared over the last couple of months, public comments, it was obvious that we have our own educators. We have, we have parent volunteers. We have those that are on school sites, that are on campus, that see it firsthand, but they don't say anything because they're afraid of retaliation. So I think we should definitely have a place for those who are on the front lines day in and day out, and can introduce that unique perspective and help reaffirm and reinforce, the culture that we want to build here at ABC. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Next, we have Board Member Long. Board Member
You're
Long.
on mute.
Any
You're on
comment?
mute, Maynard. You're on mute. We can't hear you, Maynard.
I heard that he's working on that.
Okay.
Bottom left, Maynard. Bottom left. Little microphone.
That leaves you alone for one night, man.
Okay.
I got it now.
Okay.
I would-
Yay.
I would like to wait until I see what is going to be produced at our next board meeting before I decide.
And just to chime in, last board meeting, we adopted an equity policy. And if you remember, it outlines a lot of what the action plan, it's kind of like a roadmap for what we can envision for our district. And so, some of you are wondering what that would look like. That would probably be our starting point, is that equity policy. Next, we have Board Member Nishi.
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, I'm very glad that you brought this item up. I mean, not just a resolution, but also a committee, and hopefully eventually we get some results out of this. It's a great thing that we're doing here. And I'll actually echo Vice President Mendoza's comments. Great minds think alike. I created a small group the day before to go over some of these ideas. And they said, yes, we need more student involvement, maybe 4 high school students, each representing the different cultures that we have at the different high schools. So that way they can opine as to what specifically is the issues are. Middle school is okay. It's harder for them to sometimes articulate that, but I'm open to at least adding 2 more positions. Also with this I had a great group of people last night. They just had a lot of ideas in terms of the scope of work for this committee, in terms of how we would select it. Potentially, maybe we would have community members. The board would pick, but maybe people would apply and they would have all their qualifications, and we could pick from a pool of qualified people, and that'd be open. Everybody gets to see whoever else there is that's applying for this particular position, and each of us board members could pick whichever individual we like. It would be the same policy in terms of how we pick, because we pick just one, but we pick from a different way. So that is one of the things I was thinking about. This is a great idea. I think it deserves more than just an ad hoc task force. Task force disappear after a year. It was unanimous on all the groups of people that I got together, some city attorneys and public defenders and former Whitney students and teachers in our district and grandmothers, that we try to keep it together in this thing that lasts for a while. So one potential thought I was thinking is that we call it the social Cultural Unity and Diversity Committee. Rather than adding the judicial element, which sometimes scares people, I'm thinking that would be a more of a combining type of thought, and that this group thought that it would be a good idea that they meet on a monthly basis, and after they do a report after 6 months, after 12 months, and they provide some sort of metrics for us to measure the success of how we're doing it. We have academic success, we measure that. We got to measure how we're being successful in this particular area as well. Otherwise, we're gonna be in the same spot 12 months from now. And we don't want to be just 12 months. We have to think in terms of for a longer time. So we're hoping that it could be more than just a task force, that it would be a regular standing committee, maybe monthly at the beginning, but maybe quarterly after a year or so, and just kind of go through all the details that we have here, creating metrics, the equity officer, maybe even determining what the job of that equity officer would be so that they're doing something very specific. And we'll have a lot of staff to help us with that. I totally agree. It's if we value it, we're gonna create it. So they also thought that we should look over some of the previous discrimination complaints that we had in the past, because we need a baseline to work from. And so part of their purview may be to go over the past. What happened at this school, what happened at that school, what happened at all the different schools, and find the best practices to make things better. So thank you, Madam President, for all this. Like I said, I think the name would be really good if we had a social, cultural, unity and diversity standing committee rather than a task force. And I would like to make that an action item.
Great, thank you for your input. We will move on to Board Member Say.
Madam President, this is excellent, perfect timing here. I want to echo to Dr. Rios, put this on our information item. Definitely, I support that. And I think one thing that we do need to remind to everyone, the knowledge is based on definitely number one, education. And we have the piece covered now, the ethnic study right now. We only have one high school there. We should go straight out the all high school. But the issues right now in the CSBA still have a concern about this education, ethnic study has been discussed. The curriculum still not in the finalized yet because they have so much problem right now. Which culture needs to be covered? People has been discussed, this culture is not enough information, that culture has never been mentioned. So the curriculum is still on the air, still talking about, and we need to carefully look the curriculum, what they focus and were more geared to our district. We have about 45 different language. When you have this committee, are you gonna have 45 different students from different culture, different language come to a board? We need to cautious on that. And since we have a committee, which is good, we now have education, we also have something to follow up, which is perfect to me. But what about, you can't have middle school also come to, this is a meeting sometimes at nighttime. The kids and have parents to come here and we can't have a big, huge round tables to discuss. It's gonna be very, very hard. And we can have open when this issue comes out, the student can come up, the parent can come to talk. Just like we're talking about the facility ACOG. The parent can come to vent what they think is right, what needs to be done. But I also have another suggestion. You know, the student have a club in the school, right? They have all different club. Like they have Spanish club, Chinese club, all kind of club. And they also have, I forgot. They have a lot of club. When I went to Gar High School, I see so many clubs out there. Maybe one of the things, encourage the student have their own club, have the teacher oversee it. So that way we can swing a lot from their parent, teacher see something, can they take action right away before even come to the committee. Committee is a good thing to oversee a lot of issues not being solved. What we want to do is see the outcome and see the results. That's how board need to reevaluate after 2 years, the committee's been there. Does it work or not working that we need to follow up in the future. But I think to me today, committee it's important. But I think the number of the people who participate also is important too. I think we should follow our policy as much as we can. And we have the policy. Maybe we can tweak a little bit if a board member, the vice president would like to have one or two, but we can't have like 10 students there. I mean, that's a lot. I think we can add in a 1 or 2 if board member, the vice president would like to have more. I think 1 or 2, but not more than that. And we're probably going to select the most language that we have in there, have them to But it's really hard to, though, not just most language, what's most needed right now, pre-prompting right now with the problem we have. And discrimination, cultural difference in there, that we can look into choose the student from that level. And so my focus today is I like to have individual club in our every school, high school. I like to have this committee. I'll definitely support. The last part, the social justice, that's by law, is a law already there. And we have policy there too. Am I right, Dr. Su? We have policy for social justice.
Yes, we do.
So we need to follow the social justice. We are following that as much as we can. And I know we have some leaking issues there and we need to fix it. I commend the staff to look into deeply, make sure everything what we're doing now follow the law and our board policy there. And we probably need to come board policy, bring it up again, make sure all staff to read it and being educated. And the last part, education, I think is very important. We do mention about, we heard about public comment from there too. They recommend we do need to educate our students. We do need to educate our staff. That we need to probably school district wide educate all, that including not just only teacher, our administration staff too. And that'll be my end of suggestion, board president.
Thank you. And then it will become an action item for next week. But in the goal of being consistent, I think we can start with the committee. I absolutely concur. Student voice is of the utmost importance here. And so maybe creating a subcommittee. I mean, ideally, I would like to see a group at every high school and maybe at every middle school that takes on this issue of, social justice and issues of equity on their particular campus, and then maybe send a representative to, these other meetings. So between now and the next meeting, maybe we can explore those ideas. But again, in an effort to maintain consistency of our committees, we may start there. Okay, so Dr.
Do we need a motion, Madam President?
We do need to have it moved to an action item for the next board meeting on September the 8th.
Okay. So did you want to speak to that, Chris, or did you want, I don't know who spoke.
It was Chris.
So can I make a motion to create a standing committee for social, cultural unity and diversity, utilizing the current rules as it stands, and we will determine the scope at the following action item?
I second support that. Second.
I'd like to make a friendly amendment.
Yes.
Can staff come up with maybe 2 or 3 options to help us narrow the scope so we're not up until midnight to make, just throwing that in there. If Mr. Nishi is amenable to that.
Yes, I am amenable to that.
Well, I have a clarification question. We spoke about creating an actual position. Would that have to be a separate action item, or would that be tied to this?
It will have to be a separate item because I think we're just creating the committee for the September 8th board meeting right now.
Got it. Okay. So with that, any further discussion?
So the movement right now is on the table is moved to the committee. Is that what you suggest, Dr. Rio?
The agenda as an action item.
Okay.
Yes, we're moving.
I moved and Sophie's moved and I seconded. Yeah.
Right. So now any more discussion? If not, we will do a roll call, please, Natalie.
Oh, wait a second. I thought I moved, but okay.
Okay.
And there was a friendly amendment. Are we good with the amendment?
It was a friendly amendment.
Yes. So we're good with the friendly amendment, correct?
So then there's 2 friendly amendments.
Okay. What are they?
One was the Social, Culture, and Unity and Diversity Committee being standing. And I guess with Chris's amendment would be to have staff provide us some suggestions regarding scope.
Got it. Okay. So
I hate to intervene here. It is not an action item right now on the agenda. It is an information item.
Right.
Board can move to place it on the agenda as an action item at the next meeting.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Baca. Thank you, Mr. Baca. I'm so glad you're here. I'll wait for you to say it. Thank you.
So now we do a roll call, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Roll call, please, Natalie.
Okay. Dr. Apodaca?
Aye.
Mr. Long?
Is this only to place it on the agenda?
Correct.
It's not all the other stuff you've been talking about.
No.
Okay, yes.
Mrs. Mendoza,
Yes.
Mr. Nishii,
Yes.
Dr. Rios,
Yes.
Mrs. Say,
I'm so glad Maynard say something about make sure that what we put on the table is this committee. Yes, absolutely. I agree with that.
Mrs. Yu,
Yes.
motion passes 7-0.
Okay, so now we need a second motion to create a position of such as an equity officer.
Again, I hate to intervene, but it would be just to place it on the agenda at the next meeting.
Yes.
Yes, so just to place it as an agenda item for next meeting. An action.
Madam President,
Yes.
I'd like to talk. I mean, we made a motion to move this to an action to our agenda for next board meeting.
Correct.
Yeah. So that would give us some time to discuss and for the staff to come up with some suggestions. And for staffing, I think that could wait until next meeting. I think we're rushing. We didn't have enough discussion to put that on the agenda yet. Yeah, let's wait.
Okay, we can wait. That's fine. Let me see. And as a president, I know that I have the power to put items on the agenda. For the
I'm
discretion.
sorry, point of order, Madam President. Did you make the motion or were
That's
you
what I'm
seeking the
saying.
motion?
I did not make a motion. I was asking if
Okay,
somebody
thank
wanted
you.
to make a motion, but yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we are moving to mandated reporting. Dr. Apodaca.
Thank you, Madam President. I wanted to bring this up today, and I'm going to take a shot in the dark here and guess that that's why we have legal counsel. I want to thank Mr. Baca for being here today and being present, because I have some questions, as I imagine the public does as well. We have been inundated, the entire board has, for probably more than 2 months. Myself, text messages, phone calls, emails, with regards to either recent experiences or past experiences that have occurred over the last several years. And, you know, the comments that were submitted tonight, as graphic as one of them may have been, you know, are not uncommon with the crowd of folks who have submitted comments for the last few meetings. And so I do want to emphasize to the public that the way that our meetings are structured, we can't respond directly to those comments, and we also can't discuss anything that's not on the agenda. As a board, we can't govern in a way of, well, this was mentioned in public comments, so we're going to go ahead and stop talking about the budget to address that. Legally, it's not, and you can check me on this, Mr. Baca, legally, we're not able to do that. Doesn't matter what it is, we're not able to stop what's already been made known to the public, because there very well could be folks who check the agenda and they're like, oh, none of this matters to me. None of this that's on the agenda matters to me. But in the off chance that, well, you know, somebody wants to share an experience or a negative experience or positive experience, given a program or given, you know, the education they received at ABC, you know, they would want to see that on the agenda so they can make themselves present and known. And so that's the difficulty that we have. And so I can tell you that, especially for my part, it's not a lack of caring. I'm fairly sure the board would agree with that. It's that legally our hands are tied. And so we don't want to address things without actually being able to look into them. And I thought it would be helpful to clarify exactly what a mandated reporter is, which all 7 of us are on the board, and what the process is within our school district and how we handle such reports. You know, some of the comments that were submitted were very disheartening to hear. With some folks, you know, last meeting we had, names were redacted, rightly so, names were redacted of folks who work for the district. And so those types of things we also have to be careful of because it's sensitive information and there's privacy that's involved. But on my end, and an accountability standpoint, if we have an issue that's systemic, if we have the same names that keep coming up, we have a process internally as a district to deal with that. And we can't always share that with the public. We can't always share the outcome of any disciplinary action. or the result of due process that our employees have to go through because they're entitled to that due process. On the other hand, though, we as a district also have our hands tied when it comes to what we can do and what we can refer to, who we can refer to. I know that I have my frustrations. I know parents have frustrations, but having the attorney here, I think it'd be helpful if Mr. Baca could expound a little on mandated reporting. And I'd also like to make it very clear for the public that should any things, because there are very serious allegations that have been made. Really what the consequences, right, for an employee of any public organization who fails to report any abuse or fails to follow through with an established policy and protocol that we as a district have. And if there are any shortcomings, I expect Mr. Baca would come back to us and say, okay, well, you could do this better, you could do that better, because frankly, I'm upset at the amount of comments. Some are anonymous, but many aren't. So I don't know, Mr. Baca, if you could add anything on to that, please.
Well, I'll say a couple of things. What you're asking for is a long presentation that I have done very often in my career. I have about 103-page PowerPoint that I won't go through tonight. I wasn't expecting to do that. But you are correct. If you are a mandated reporter, there are consequences to not reporting acts of discrimination or acts of child abuse. And acts of child abuse is very broadly defined in the Penal Code. It's interesting that the Child Abuse Reporting Act exists in the Penal Code because the Penal Code is normally where you find criminal offenses. So obviously the legislature took it very, very seriously. And, I think doing presentations on child abuse reporting is something that I would be glad to help the district with, whether it be some time with the board or whether it be time with administration and administrators. We would be happy to do that. Let me, just one anecdotal thing. In 1996, ABC Unified actually made case law, and I was involved in that case. Back in the early 90s, sexual harassment of students was not something that could lead to the termination of a teacher. At ABC, there was a teacher who allegedly was harassing young middle school kids. The board at that time, a very different board than exists now, found that to be reprehensible and asked if we could do anything about it. There wasn't any case law to support the release of a teacher for sexual harassment. For molestation, yes, but not just harassment and grooming. The board charged me with bringing that matter to trial in a teacher dismissal case. You begin with the trial and then you go into the appellate courts. At the trial level, the court, of course, held there isn't a precedent for dismissing a teacher for sexual harassment. The board then very bravely, I think, and courageously asked me to appeal the matter. We appealed the matter all the way to the Supreme Court, and ABC established a precedent that sexual harassment of students is unacceptable, and that teachers could be released for sexually harassing students. A lot has gone on since then, but ABC was one of the first school districts that took seriously the issue of sexual harassment of students. So I admire the board now continuing in that vein, continuing to be concerned about what is happening on campuses, not only involving potentially employees who are not acting appropriately, but also involving students who are not acting appropriately. And committing itself and committing the district to doing things properly, to making a difference. You made a difference 24 years ago that kind of changed the face of what sexual harassment was in the schools. And it took a board who was committed to doing that, despite a lot of pressure on the other side. And I admire that it's the same sentiment that exists today. So thank you, Dr. Appice.
Thank you, Mr. Baca. Well, I think that you mentioned, so many years ago, decades ago, literally, that we did make case law, which is a very big deal for us. I'd like to venture out there then, because a lot's happened since we actually. And so here's the fuse that really started this whole thing going, at least from my point of view. Because I have been flooded by parents calling me, and I do always tell them to, well, first I ask, have you spoken to the administrator? Have you spoken to the principal, the vice principal, a counselor? If the case is no, have you spoken to the district? We want to obviously go through those channels and try to give the school site the ability to remedy it, because I, as a board member, that's not my function. My function is the 10,000-foot view. It's not there in the classroom every single day. However, the biggest and the ongoing response was, I did, or we did, and they just said we couldn't do anything. And so while I'm not familiar with where we fall when you have, let's say, a group of students, maybe their sports team, that's in possession of, on their personal devices, personal technological devices, they're in possession of explicit photos, explicit videos of students who are freshmen, sophomores, juniors, or minors, right? And the response, the alleged response usually is, well, it's their personal phone, we can't go through it. Something like that, you have to go to law enforcement. Well, they go to law enforcement says, no, we can't do anything because, it's not you go to the school. So would it be within our bounds if we wanted to create a policy as a school district to say, any student who is found that be in possession of explicit photos of a minor of another student on campus, and we know for a fact that they have it, that if they're on a permit, that permit gets revoked. If they are using that to shame, to bully, to manipulate other students, male or female, that they have no place in our school district. Is that too far-fetched to do as far as having that as a policy? I know it's not law, but having that as a policy in our school district?
No, I don't think it's far-fetched at all. I think it probably already occurs. If it's something that occurs on campus, involves the students, we have a right to discipline that student. And if it involves some kind of harassment or discrimination or bullying, and we do have policies on that, we can discipline students for that. You're right. I mean, you're being very nuanced and how we approach this. It's not an easy thing to do, but certainly it's something that I think the board and the district would support. That's unacceptable conduct. I think we would find that to be unacceptable conduct and be able to discipline students for that.
So here's my next thing, and I think this is something that, from an administration point of view, if we have employees, and I'm saying, and we have, let's say a parent and a student has proof, timestamped proof, screenshots, they can verify it with their mobile carrier, et cetera, that we have employees in our school district who viewed the material and did not act. What do we do at that point? Are we able then to have that? I mean, I understand they have to move up through the district. They have their labor groups. If they're principals or administrators, they have their their management association. So what I'm trying to get here, end of the day, what I'm trying to get to is a zero tolerance policy for any type of behavior when it comes to folks keeping and maintaining, and pardon me for using, but it's child pornography. If you have, minors that are in explicit, positions that are not fully clothed, whatever it might be, they're minors. And so I guess what I want to know is, with your help, right, could we develop a policy to where parents have a recourse and where we as a board can say, look, we hear you. It's part of our policy. Every teacher, every administrator, every paraeducator, every single employee of our district is well aware of the fact that if they see anything like this, they have to go straight away and they have to report it. Versus the opposite. And so I guess that's what I'm trying to get toward. That's the reason why I wanted to put this on there, so the public is aware of what we can do and really what we can't do. And these comments just, I mean, this is the third time that they've had to resubmit or submit public comments with regards to this. So I just, I want to make sure that we're giving it the time that I think it merits and it deserves. So do you think that's unreasonable as far as having a district-wide policy when it comes to students
Absolutely.
and admin?
I think you probably have some policies now. It's been a while since I've looked at your policies from that standpoint. And
we do.
Yeah. And
But
it's
not
multi-layered because
Right.
I think what you're talking about is student discipline, employee discipline. We do have a duty to investigate. We have a duty to supervise. And there's potential and a duty to report, and there's potential liability in each of those areas if a district is not acting appropriately. I'm almost certain you already have policies. It's difficult to follow through on some of these with people who are anonymous or people who feel some sense of fear for coming forward. In this district, I've never known that there are any repercussions to somebody who wants to report something of that sort. Almost the opposite. I think this district is bent over backwards to respond to those kinds of allegations. I'm aware of nobody who would find that acceptable and would be glad to assist in developing maybe more nuanced policies as we're moving forward.
And I'll end with this. So that way we can open it up to the rest of the board. I guess what I want to put out there is that my earlier reference to, knowledge isn't commensurate with results. Accountability is. And I feel that given the volume of comments, the volume of conversations that I know I've had, and I'm sure many of our board, my board colleagues have had with parents that are struggling with this because, the allegations are very severe, but so is the repercussions for them, just emotionally, psychologically, financially. And so I guess what I'd like is to have an accountability factor built in. So that way every administrator, because we do have the policy. However, if you do not report this, or however, if this comes to the attention of the district, whoever their supervisors at the district, or the attention of the board, there is absolutely going to be consequences. So there's that. And then second, I'm glad that you're enthusiastic about crafting something like this. I do believe that there are folks who, if you as legal counsel would sit with them, either a Zoom or socially distanced room, they will sit with you. They will share with you what they went through or what they're alleging, right? And at the very least, they can be heard, and that can help us craft policy. Because if you want to go for those nuances, I guarantee you there are things that these parents and students will share where you're just like, you know what, we've had this policy for a long time. However, adding that little tidbit makes all the difference in the world. Because a lot's changed, obviously, in the last 24 years, like you mentioned. So if you're open to that, I'd like to discuss that. And with that, my goal was to have this placed as an action item at the next board meeting or the second board meeting, so we have enough time to develop it. But with that, Madam President, thank you, Mr. Baca, again. As always, I'm sorry, I'm always a headache whenever you're at a meeting, but I have to make sure that we get our answers down pat. So Madam President, I toss it back to you.
Thank you. Now we'll go into discussion. So we'll start with our Vice President Mendoza.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Baca, for being here. It's a really important issue that we're discussing tonight. I want to go to public comments. We had, like Dr. Apodaca said, we had many public comments. And as much as I love hearing from Scott, it kind of lost the meaning coming from Scott and not actually hearing from the students and the parents who actually wrote the comments. Mm-hmm. And I admire them because telling their stories is not easy, and to do it in a very public forum. And I know we're changing the way that we're going to do public comments. Is that because you advised us to do that, or is that just something we decided to do?
I'm going to jump in here. Jim has worked with me about doing our virtual meetings differently, especially with public comments. So when the next time, not in September, not on September the 8th, but the following meeting on the 22nd, we're hoping that we can change it so that Scott is not going to be reading the public comments. It will be in the voice of the person who's speaking.
Are
Because-
they going to be logged onto our Zoom meeting?
Yes, they will. Because we just had to purchase an additional piece for Zoom in order to be able to establish the public comments when they speak during the public comment section.
Okay, so I don't know if you've worked out all the logistics. How does that work when they're on Zoom? Do they message through the chat that they want to do public comment? Does somebody, how is that going to look in our next meeting?
I'm going to have, if possible, if Scott is still here, I know that he just purchased information. Scott?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sue. To your question, Board Member Mendoza, Vice President Mendoza, there is an add-on to Zoom called Webinar, and this allows us to control who is actually being seen, which would be you and the cabinet and whoever else is presenting that evening. And it allows dial-in and a raise your hand feature for those watching to be interactive with the board and provide public comment through their own voice in real time. It's just their voice, but you'd be able to hear them. This is something that a lot of school districts and a lot of local city council meetings are using right now. So it'd be in line with those.
And when they raise their hand, does Zoom keep track of who priority, like I raise my hand first, I raise my hand second?
Those features are built in, and I'll be moderating those. So then I can announce who it is and then tell them it's their turn to speak.
And since we're opening it up to the public so they can do public comments, I know we usually don't put the link up, how far in advance are we going to put the link up for the public?
We'll do it at the time that we would, I would assume anyway, we haven't finalized this, but when we release the agenda for the board meeting, it'd be included in the agenda when we release that prior to the board meeting.
And is that going to be the only way that the public can submit public comments, or can they do it? Are they still going to be able to do it via email, or we're just doing it through Zoom?
My understanding is we're just going to move towards Zoom.
Okay. Okay. Well, I appreciate that Dr. Apodaca put this on information, and I do want to move it to an action item for the next meeting. I think it's I think our public has spoken, and they want us to listen, and they want us to take action. That's it, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Clerk Yu?
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, hearing those public comments last board meeting and today really breaks my heart that these things are happening in our district to our youth and our community on both sides, because the names that were mentioned in the football team and the baseball team, I really feel for those parents too, because I mean, it's just the whole, pain and the hurt and hurting each other through the social media. And I hope and I really wish that we can work together to reform the culture and implement the policies that we have in place, and update our policy, keeping in mind that social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook is could be a real destructive tool. I have a question, and I don't know who can answer this, maybe Dr. Sue, Dr. Krishna Wai. I would like to know all these comments that were mentioned. It sounded like that these assaults, harassment have been brought up to the staff, but it just was, swept under the rug. It wasn't followed through. Have any of these cases from this last Tuesday and today public comments been reported to our schools, our principals, and specifically at Cerritos High School?
I would like to have Dr. Wise address that, please.
Good evening to our board president as well as our board members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I, as director of secondary schools, also have been touched tremendously by the experience of students that have been reported. But I do want to say that every incident that has been reported to the board has been fully investigated. We take pride in our schools and wanting students to have a great experience in schools. And so every situation that we were made aware of, we definitely investigated at the time. I think one of the things that we do need to work on and moving forward is really working with our schools to be more, to open up our students to be able to speak more proactively. I'm a little bit concerned about some of the timelines that happen for students. We want to be immediate in our response when students are in crisis or things are happening with our students. And unfortunately, in some of these stories, the things that happen to students were of some time. That doesn't mean that it's not important or it's not relevant to their student experience. It's just that we want to be timely and giving our students the voice to be able to speak up when things are happening or speak up when they see things happening at our schools. And so that is some of the campaign that Scott and I have been talking about, is really helping our students find the voice so that they can speak in a more timely manner so that we can address issues that they have in school. None of us want to have an experience where students leave our schools and feel uncomfortable. Our jobs are really to protect students and make them safe. And so what our thoughts are is really to be proactive and help our students have voice so we can respond in a more timely manner.
Thank you. So my question is, some of this incident happened a couple of years ago. So what I'd like to know is, was this incident reported to the school a couple of years ago?
That answer for me is no. We found out about it at the board meeting. These new incidents have happened at the board meeting just recently in July and August. That's when our schools and I were made aware of it.
So these cases have not been reported in the past?
That is correct.
And what is the protocol when sexual assault is reported? What is the chain of command? Do we have a chain of command in place?
We do. So we really hope that students feel comfortable to first discuss their issues with their teachers. At our staffs, our schools are fully staffed with counselors, assistant principals, deans, and principals. So we hope that they are one of those people. But in recent years, we've also hired mental health professionals to actually help our students as another avenue of consideration for our students to have someone to speak to when they have concerns. But our schools are very much equipped to help support students with actual people with credentials for that work. And we're really happy with our mental health professionals. They're actually credentialed to do that work, as well as our counselors with their PPS credentials. And so our schools are staffed with people that can actually help.
Because these are all minors. And when minors talk to each other through social media and names come up, this can be more disruptive. And I'm glad to hear that we have mental health credential who knows how to handle these cases properly. And would they report to the principal? Are they required to report to the principal?
We have some levels of confidentiality for our mental health providers. However, if we have students that are in crisis or there's been a violation of the law, we are not only mandated reporters, but we're also responsible for keeping discipline and order in our school sites. And so with that being said, if there's something that is a danger to our students or themselves, those type of things are reported to the principal for his principal to kind of support that action and to support schools or students.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I'm very relieved to hear that we have a policy and implementation in place at our district. Thank you, Dr. Krishna Weiss. And now I have a question for Mr. Baca for social media and board, members of our conduct. Is it advisable for a board member to engage with minors in social media, whether it be Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, and encourage the minors to share their stories of their sexual assault experience?
Typically, I would indicate that the best way to do it is if something is reported to a board member, then it is that the individual who reports it should be advised that it needs to be sent to administration. So it's difficult because I can imagine that there are different instances in which board members are doing things on social media that at times are not inappropriate, but maybe not advisable. I typically will advise board members that it's best not to be too involved in social media when it has to do with district affairs, only because I'm aware of many instances where there is a potential liability that is attached to that. So I will be a careful lawyer and advise boards to be very careful with social media.
Because I had several moms from Cerritos High School whose daughters received messages with Instagram and Twitter to encourage them to share their stories with a board member, and had the name and the phone number and everything on there. And many, girls saw that, shared with each other, and it just kind of riled up. Wow, what's happening? What's happening? And many stories came up. So these are all minors, and I am concerned about the liability. Is it advisable to meet up with the minors individually by bypassing the principal of the school to investigate ourselves and have interviews?
Yeah, I've done workshops with the board where I will indicate that individual board members do not have authority for school district matters. The board as a whole does, but individual board members have very limited authority. If there's investigation should occur through the proper channels, and that's through administration or through the board itself. It should be brought to the attention of the board. There are instant on the one hand, on the other hand, meeting with constituents is appropriate. Meeting with minors without parents is not advisable, obviously. But meeting with parents and students, sometimes that occurs. They are your constituents, and you are charged with knowing what is happening with your constituents. When you discover that there is something amiss, I think it's very important that administration be contacted. The board is responsible for policy in the district. Administration is responsible for obviously administering those policies.
Because when I saw the Instagram on the social media and the public comments that came out last week, Mr. Baca, I'm concerned about the names that were mentioned during the public comments. What are the liabilities do we have as a district?
Yeah, there's very little you can do with public comments. And officers of school districts, including employees and certainly senior employees, are in a position where they are subject to public comment, even if that public comment is negative. There is an appellate court case, the Marino versus Baca case, not related to it, another Baca, in which the court made very clear that the board can do very little with respect to monitoring public comment. I think if something is disruptive, if something is obscene, the board could take action. But if it's a negative comment toward an employee, especially a more senior employee or the board, there's very little the board can do to temper that.
I see. So even the names were mentioned with each other, we are not liable.
Correct. And certainly the board is not liable for listening to it. I think if there's something that is revealed and the district does nothing about it, there's potential liability. But sitting through a board meeting where a member of the public mentions the name of somebody creates no liability for the district. Potentially there's liability for the person who made the comment if it's defamatory. One of the hard things in this virtual world is identifying people who are making comments. I don't think it was ever anticipated when the Brown Act was written that we would be doing public meetings like this. So when public comment, when public comment was something that was mandated by the Brown Act, I think there was an expectation that it would occur in person. And it isn't now. And I am finding with a lot of my districts that more and more people are calling in to make comments that they typically would not do if they had to go to the site for a board meeting. So.
Thank you, Mr.
So,
Baca.
I think you're fine.
As soon as I saw the stories on Instagram, I called Patrick Walker at Cerritos High School principal, and he also received the report. And at the same day, he started the investigation, which happened a couple of years ago. And he spent the whole week investigating and interviewing different families. And I have known Patrick Walker for the past 7 years, and he disciplined my daughter in 6th grade for playing a mischievous prank on a friend with social media. And she just got her phone, and I did not have the chance to educate her yet. And Patrick Walker thanked me for cooperating as a board member. He did not hesitate to discipline a board member's daughter because the other student who was pranked, the father came in to make a report, and he followed up and he did the investigation and he disciplined my daughter. And I'm sure he was not comfortable to execute the discipline, but she learned her lesson in 6th grade. And now she graduated from Cerritos High School and she will be attending USC on a scholarship. And we need to foster a culture for our youth to feel safe, to report any type of harassment to our school counselors and mental health counselors, our teachers. I mean, we need to work towards that because it breaks my heart to hear these stories. And it breaks my heart that our educators during this pandemic are, the fingers are pointed at them. I know that there's room for improvement, but we're going through a pandemic. We need to get ready to educate 20,000 students virtually in a matter of few weeks. And I know that Patrick Walker would never bypass any type of sexual harassment, zero tolerance. He would have worked on it. He disciplined a board member's daughter for playing a prank on a fellow student, which was just a small joke in 6th grade. And we need to foster a culture where our youth and employee will feel safe to report any assault and harassment. And I do like to ask, our staff, Dr. Sue, Dr. Christina Weiss, and Dr. Valencia Mayfield to look at our board policy and implement social media. Times are changing, and it's not just one way. I just heard another story from a father, a dad. His son received a picture, inappropriate picture from a girl he didn't ask for. So the cases can be both ways. We have to protect our minors and our families, and it has to start at home. And Dr. Sue, I would like to make a request. Can we have a report on data of sexual assault and sexual harassment cases in the last 5 years at ABC and what actions took place? I would like that report to be made the report to all the board members. And Dr. President Rios, I think that this is a grave matter. We should not rush into putting this on the action for our September meeting, because September meeting should be devoted to opening schools. The governor gave us few weeks to shift from hybrid to go 100% virtual, which affects 20,000 students. We can investigate. We need to give Dr. Christina Weiss more time to investigate and prepare, go through our policy with our legal advisor, Jim Baca, Mr. Baca, and prepared for a meeting or a special study session in our in October. That's my opinion. Thank you, Dr. Rios. Floor is back to you.
Thank you, Board Member Dr. Apodaca.
Thank you, Madam President.
Wouldn't you go to law?
Dr. Rios, you have to take turn. It would be Sophie, Maynard, and Ernie's turn. He already had his floor.
No, I had the action item. I introduced the action
Yeah.
item, and then we went in order for discussion, which is typical for what we've been doing online. So it went Vice President
Point of order.
Mendoza,
Point
and then
of
went to you.
order.
You can't interrupt me while I have the floor with a point of order. I'm sorry.
Dr. Rios,
No, I'm sorry,
Mr. Apodaca
Sue,
had
you
his
can't.
time
Sue,
to talk.
No, Sue, that's not how it works.
You're out of order, correct?
Okay.
You're going following the regular format that we use. Dr. Apodaca happened, to introduce the item, but I think it's also fair to let him be part of the discussion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. So, but it's all right. Board member, do you know of a board member who has actually met with a minor or set up a conversation in person or otherwise with a minor over Instagram or Twitter? Like met with them in person, as you mentioned earlier?
Mr. Baca.
Yes.
Is it appropriate for me to answer board member Apodaca's question?
I don't think it's necessary, nor is it prohibited. I think this is an information item, and if you wish not to answer it, I think you can choose not to answer it. So,
Board member Apodaca, I will just answer this. I was really shocked to see your name and your phone number on the Instagram.
That's not my question. With all due respect,
inviting the
do you know of a board
students?
member who met with somebody in person? Do you know of a board member who actually met with somebody in person? A minor alone.
I think you know better.
Well, let me respond to that then. Here's why I ask you that. Our board policy requires, or rather requests from board members to, when you engage with the public, then refer it to the superintendent. You're referring to a text or a tweet that was sent that's still public, that's still up, where a young lady shares a story. It's a long thread where she shares it. And I'm reading it because they're tagging our HR department. They were tagging the district, right? They were calling out ABC Unified School District. Now no, I didn't say, hey, let's meet in person. I said, hello, student, right? I said, I can't send them messages. This is my cell phone number. I'm a board member. I want to know more. Now, frankly, I believe that I have a duty. If I see that either a current student, former student, anybody who's a stakeholder in our district, the very least that's incumbent on me is to say, hey, by the way, if that's false, give me your side of the story, and then I'll hand it over to the superintendent. To gloss it over, that's exactly what those public comments were about tonight and all the other meetings that led up to tonight. And so I've never met with a student alone or without their parent. I've spoken to parents. I've asked them to share with me, what their experience is, but in no way, shape, or form. And I can't imagine you're speaking about me. I would hope that you're not, because every single one of those students has been submitting public comments. So have their parents, actually. And so my concern, when I brought this up to our superintendent and I let her know, hey, by the way, this is what happened. I spoke to her mother, and I did tell the superintendent, the mother is concerned what her legal recourse is. I told the superintendent, that's where it ended for me. I spoke to the parent. I told them I would bring it up to the superintendent, and I did. I wanted to know more about our policy, and that's what we're doing tonight. It's taken a while to do it, but we're doing it. So that's my bigger concern. Second, we're elected officials and we serve the public. Just as equally as we'll talk about Black Lives Matter and having these systemic issues that are impacting our stakeholders, as uncomfortable as it makes us, we still have a duty, morally, if not legally, to look into these things, not investigate. I'm not out there gathering stories to submit them. And they brought them to us. Everything that you're hearing in these comments were shared. They've been emailing us and calling us and texting us. So, I appreciate the fact that you're concerned that I'm trying to meet up with minors, but that's simply not the case. And in fact, if you read the comments and you listen to some of the stories from parents who are putting their kids on counseling, from parents who are having issues because their children are threatening to hurt themselves, I'm sorry. I know it's a very uncomfortable conversation, but we have to address it. We have to. And so that said, I think it's, we can talk to whoever we want to talk to because they elected us, but we can't act unilaterally on behalf of the district. That's why tonight we're having this conversation so that we as a board can decide what to do. I didn't go out there and say, well, we're going to do this. No, let's have the conversation, see where the shortcomings are and go from there. Because really, that's all that's within my purview as one vote on this board to do. And so we're having the conversation. That said, Mr. Baca, what is the statute of limitations in California for reporting something? For reporting sexual harassment, or in this case, let's say it's sexual abuse.
Yeah, it should be
by a minor.
Yeah, under the Child Abuse Reporting Act, it should be reported immediately, and within 3 days, it should be placed in writing.
What if we have former students who are in college now who went through something and they didn't report it? If they're listening tonight, do we just tell them, well, too bad, too late? Or do we encourage them to interact?
I'm talking about the requirement for mandated reporters to report. Certainly, okay. There are people who have been sexually abused or harassed, and they believe that it occurred at the district. They should report it to us. There's a long statute of limitations now on sexual matters, and in some respects, it's indeterminate because it only begins when the person realizes that they were abused. So we certainly would encourage people if they believe that they've been harassed by somebody in the district to report it to the superintendent. So.
That said, would it be appropriate then, because recognizing that as a board member, we can only go as board members, we only govern with at the will and the pleasure of the majority, right? I'm only one board member, I'm one vote. So that said, given our board policy with regards to referring it to the district, referring it to the appropriate, we give it to the superintendent then pushes it out to the right people. I want to make a distinction, if you can, with the question, which was, I think I'm a little muddy. So if I understood Dr. Wise appropriately or correctly, it was that anything that happens at the school site, we were not made aware of because typically, if it had been made aware at the district level, I wholeheartedly believe we would have taken care of it. But I guess my concern is what if it occurs at the school site level, whether it's a teacher or an administrator or some other member of the staff, and it doesn't come to the district. We as a district have no idea, right? We have no ability to enforce that. So a lot of the folks that came out here said, we never went to the district. We went to an administrator, we went to somebody that was a teacher or someone we trusted, and it never went to the district. So I'm encouraging those folks to now come to the district. So we can't do anything about something we don't know. So statute of limitations. Can we reinforce, is it permissible to show to put out there what the consequences are for failing to report as a mandated reporter? I mean, can we emphasize that strongly enough, or is there a concern with us actually doing that?
Again, that's nuanced. I think there are instances where it could lead to discipline up to and including dismissal, depending on the egregiousness of the matter. Go ahead.
I was going to say, but we as a board rely on our staff, right? The reason why we have this conversation tonight is to make sure that as a board, if this moves to an action item and a majority approves it, it's to then we set the policy and then they implement it. And I think that sets a nice milestone for accountability. If it were to come to us that an administrator failed within 72 hours to report it, or that anybody failed to, I mean, is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's a little complicated. Certainly with administrators, the board has great authority in determining what type of conduct is appropriate. With non-administrators, you do have a duty to negotiate in a lot of those instances. So consequently, the authority of the board is not as clear. and certainly with respect to students, you have a great deal of authority in determining what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. Certainly at this district, at ABC, the notion of sexual harassment and sexual abuse is absolutely unacceptable. And while there really isn't anything such as a zero tolerance policy because of due process, I think it is conduct that is not acceptable at the district. And this is one district that takes it seriously and is willing to take matters into court if necessary.
Okay, and I'd also like to end with this then for my portion of the discussion. I would not equate a childhood prank at any level, K through 12, to possession of child pornography on a phone or to disseminating that information to other schools and other students via social media. I believe that those are completely different tiers, regardless of who the administrator is. I would not equate a prank with possession of something that is against federal law to have on your phone, even if you yourself are a minor. It doesn't equate. That's all I have. Thank you, Madam President.
I have to respectfully disagree with Dr. Apodaca. That's not what I meant. I did not equate the prank with disseminating pornography. I said if Mr. Walker would pay attention and have action and investigation for a prank, he would certainly 100% more follow up and investigate on a sexual harassment and sexual assault report is what I meant. Correction, Dr. Apodaca.
Thank you. Now we will move on to Board Member Law. Board Member Law? Board Member Nishi?
Yes. Hold on. I don't see Board Member Law. All right. So I have a daughter, and if I heard all these situations with happening to her, that would kill me. I would be the worst person to be objective on something like that because it would be my daughter. The other part of me is an attorney, and I believe in the process. I believe, in fact, that we had actually just passed a sexual harassment policy within the last year, because I vaguely remember wordsmithing a lot of the parts, trying to make it a little bit more airtight. I think we have some penalties if people breach these procedures, particularly if it says 1 day. You have 1 day to report. Mandated reporters, if they don't follow the law, if they don't follow this rule, they could be fired. And I think they would not want to sweep these things under the rug. But saying that, I can totally understand if people don't want to report these things because it's embarrassing. I think, as Sue Yu said, we do need to take some time on this. We have 20,000 students that rely on us to make good decisions. These people can make some complaints so that way we can follow up and make sure that justice is served and make sure that all of these incidences are investigated fully. But if we create a policy half-cocked and we don't even send it to our legislative review committee for no reason, and we don't let our attorney look at it, I think that's wrong. It's going to be a little while before we get back to school, and these students can actually make the report like today, right now. I'm kind of wondering also, nobody's really talked about the employees and some of their rights that they may have. Mr. Baca, related to, we have policies regarding current live investigations for employees, and we keep those things confidential.
Correct.
Does it make a difference if we have rules that say we keep these things confidential, and then we have our PIO read everything but their last name on the record? I mean, they'll say the English teacher at Gar High School who taught juniors with the first name Jamil, or Ernie for that matter, or Sarah. And then we don't actually give them the last name, but aren't we a little bit complicit when we don't enforce the confidentiality rules in our own? I mean, we're reading the public comments. We know the rules.
There's a little bit of conflation with the rights of employees to keep things confidential and the right of the public to express issues that they are having with district and district officers. And the Brown Act does permit members of the public to reveal things that the district would not be able to reveal because the district is held to confidentiality and individual might not be.
I understand that, but in this case, the individual has a comment, but we have a district employee reading that comment. Don't we have an obligation to follow the rules and make sure, like, if a person in the public breaks the rule, we can cut them off, right?
Correct.
But if we...
It's not if they break and breaking the rules is difficult. They have to create a disturbance. They have to do something that is almost obscene before you're able to take action. And you can, a board president can, for example, advise an individual who may be using salty language that is not appropriate. But under the Baca Marino case, as a member of the public, they have a right to speak in public, even if you might find it reprehensible, and even if administrator might find it reprehensible.
I totally agree. I totally agree with that.
True. But and as I indicated earlier, now that we live in this virtual world, we're reinventing rules to an extent. We needed to find a way to allow the public to express itself. And some school districts, they don't have the ability to Zoom public comment in. I recommend it. I think it's a good idea. I think it was well worth the investment that you folks have put into it. And one of the reasons is because you're seeing some of the problems with it. People are less likely to reveal things that are confidential and maybe not true if they have to do it themselves and not anonymously. And even though they didn't, I don't think that was even something that was considered when the Brown Act was written. I think there was an expectation that people have a right to speak. It may be reprehensible, but if they say something that's defamatory, they have to do it in public.
With their own voice, not through our PIO.
Yeah. So
yeah,
I think we're solving those problems little by little.
Yes, I think so. Regarding actions, in terms of investigations, don't some of these sexual harassment issues come before the board? Don't we adjudicate some of these things if we're going to determine to terminate an employee?
Well, it depends if it's classified, if it's certificated, or if it's an administrator. If it's certificated, the answer is no. I mean, that goes in front of a commission on professional competence, and they ultimately make the determination. With classified employees, you could be the last appellate body that ultimately makes a decision. And certainly with administrators, if there's discipline of administrators, the board could adjudicate it. Normally it goes to a hearing officer, but the board will accept or not accept the determination of the hearing officer.
Okay, so if we independently investigate some of these things before, we could actually be disqualified from making the final decision.
Potentially, yeah, if you're too involved in it.
Like if we leave our telephone number out there and a lot of people call, would that potentially be minor calls and does that?
Yeah, I think there's a careful balance that you have. I mean, I think you have to listen to your constituents, and sometimes your constituents are going to reveal things that might otherwise be confidential. And that's why council strongly encourages board members to immediately report that to an administrator. And you raise a good reason as well. I mean, potentially you could be an adjudicator, and receiving too much information could disqualify you, or council might recommend that you recuse yourself. because you have too much information. My other concern is liability of individual board members. Receiving information and disseminating information, I think you have to be extremely careful. You know that in this environment, you're completely immune, almost completely immune from liability because of sovereign immunity. Sovereign immunity exists with entities that have a right to make a decision. And as Dr. Apodaca indicated, an individual board member doesn't have a right to make a decision. You may have a duty to listen to a constituent, but then pass that along to somebody who can ultimately investigate it.
But it's a problem if we breach our procedures, our sexual harassment policy that we have here in terms of following the chain of command, following or not intervening in live investigations.
Yeah.
Particularly if we don't know if they're live investigations or not. Probably when we send out questions, we don't know if they're live or not.
Yeah, potentially. I mean,
that is a problem, isn't it?
It is. I mean, there's many different scenarios as there are cases that are brought to you. So, I mean, there are going to be instances where you have to listen to somebody and then pass it along. There are going to be instances where you indicate to somebody immediately, you know, that's something I probably shouldn't hear, but I want you to talk to the superintendent, and then you would talk to the superintendent and tell the superintendent that that individual spoke to you so that there would be appropriate follow-up.
We would defer to the superintendent or the principal.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. What did you actually get a chance to review through our sexual harassment policy?
No, I wasn't sure what was going to be brought up by you folks, so I'm responding cold today. So with just 30 years of experience.
So you know, maybe it would be a good idea before we create a whole new committee, because I think we, like I said, I remember wordsmithing this a while ago. I think we do have some penalties. I think some of the penalties are very dire, but it's been a while since I've read through it. Maybe you could read through it before we.
No, absolutely. Dr. Sue and I'll talk later this week, if not tomorrow.
Definitely. I just want to jump in and just say that our board policy on sexual harassment for both students and our employees is found under BP 5145.7 for students, and then BP 4018.1C for employees. It is we just revised it last June, just to let you know, June of 2019. So it's a clear policy to me. And, but as I recall Dr. Wise saying, it's about the ability to be able to be very proactive when something does happen, because we simply cannot do something if we don't know anything about the situation.
So maybe it's not so much our procedures, but that should be looked into anyway. And maybe it's something that our Legislative Review Committee could look into first, because that's what we have in terms of our regular policy, but also the implementation of those procedures and investigations of these many telephone calls that we've heard. So I think in order to hear that, before we go wild, we have to listen to those complaints and investigate following our specific procedures. And if there's a penalty involved, then the penalty should be exacted. Again, I would never want my daughter to have that kind of situation ever. It would be hard for me to follow a procedure if that happened. But also I understand that the rules and procedures are there to make sure that we have fairness, and that the person who didn't get to speak and didn't comment today doesn't get judged in the court of public opinion, which is the worst way to hear. I remember there was a situation where people were accusing these people of doing these terrible things, and they were later found innocent. But nobody listened to that part. They were just damned forever. Nobody cared that they were found innocent. Not even innocent. They were actually, it was found out that they were liars. And I'm not saying that that's the case. I am not saying that that's the case. We definitely need to investigate. But before we irrevocably in this world destroy someone, we better be pretty darn sure. We better investigate. So that's my comment. I don't think we need to rush. This is an important issue, but it's something that shouldn't be rushed. Just like a $250 million budget, we couldn't do that in 10 minutes. We did that in almost an hour. That was important. We have to ask the questions. Similarly, we're not going to rush and condemn everybody. I think we need to go through our procedures, follow the rules. If the Legislative Review Committee thinks that there's a lot of holes, or if our council feels that there's a lot of holes, let's follow that, and we will make changes. And if there's and following up with all the investigations, we got to make sure that they get heard within the law. Anyway, that's my comment and opinion. Thank you.
Member Say?
Wow, being here 12 years. I'm so glad I spoke to Mary, Dr. Sue. I say we really need our Lori to be here tonight. As we can see, one of the things I think our board member forgot one thing. We elect our president here. We have a president, Dr. Rios here. The board really should work with our president. Then Dr. Sue, we hired her. She worked with us, and we need to work with her too. She's a number one. If we anything, we should do this with the two people first. And all board members really should discuss with the president and find a solution, even find a solution. And I don't think we exercise that much in here as the past couple of years from my personal experience. I remember the so-called National Sexual Assault Hotline created has a reason. It made it very clear. They're never releasing records or information about the call without the consent of the caller. But the issue, the caller is minor. That I have a concern that to be part of the national, this is the things we need to be careful, except obligated by the law. And only making a report to police or other agents when the caller consents, unless obligated by the law. It's always the law. The mandate report is by the law. We all need to follow. And Ms. Baca, you mentioned very clearly about the 72 hours report that I'm concerned about right now. I'm so glad Ms. Baca saw that. And my concern right now is I need to ask Ms. Baca. Apparently it's during this, it's like the way I got report from board member Sue and board member Avocado tonight. But I am concerned if things happen during the report came out, the result, the information came out during the school off time, summertime. So my question to you right now, when assault happens between the minors outside the school, and what is the jurisdiction of the school and the law enforcement in the role in here?
Well, I think when we become aware that there is potential child abuse and somebody is a mandated reporter, and that mandated reporter becomes aware that something has occurred, it doesn't matter when it occurred. I think the response should be an immediate response. You're supposed to make an immediate telephone call, and then within 3 days, fill out a report form and submit that as well. But because it happened a long time ago, does not relieve the mandated reporter of the obligation to report it.
I'm glad this student came forward. Well, I'm a mother, I'm also going to grandma right now. I have 2 kids. Promise me within 5 years, after 5 years, you will have more students come to, more pre-K and kindergarten program. Kids coming out. My 2 of them will be here, belong to here.
Well,
but my concern, thank you, Mr. Baca. But my concern right now is how we're going to board working it together. I know we have provided many Brown Act lessons. A lot of even like COVID-19 just totally changed a lot of situations that we cannot control, such as public comment. A lot of people say we have so many people in the comment. How come we're not being heard? How come you have to put out the on the online to let us read? You can't read during our board meeting. It's a lot of lesson learned. As a board, I always feel, as board member, I said there's no win situation for me. Either or, I don't do this or don't do this wrong. But I think what we're trying to do tonight is just to understand what is our role in here. What can we do together to serve to all? we do get a call, and I think that it's a very important student come forward and to express their feeling, and it hurts. And sometimes the story being covered, and I'm a nurse practitioner, so I do see a case like that. For me, automatically, I'll just call the police and a social worker get involved with it, because it's not I want to get my hands off from there, but it's important to handle in a proper way. If you don't handle right, you're absolutely correct. Our board get jeopardized right there. Our reputation, not just our board, our entire district. We have to look into it. We, as myself, I'm speaking for myself, as an elected official, I was looking for all. I'm looking for my student, what's the best interest in our student. But I'm also looking at the district. I'm looking at my staff. What is the appropriate way for me to handle the situation like this? And I think we all need, as a lesson learned, we all need to be careful, handle this business. We need to know this mandate report is so important. There's law right there already. My suggestion tonight, really, back to the policy. I know we just had it last year, but I think the society has been changed. The social media have played a big thing. The students are using social media into everywhere they go. And that should be including our in our handbook, in our the planner. I know this hotline sexual assault. I know that, and I think Dr. Sui probably can verify what I say here. The couple things that we put out there. One is the student planner, one is the student handbook, and our website also posted. I mean, maybe and those that can double check for me again. Those hotline also posted in the school. And I know when my kids was in the school at that time, I know there was a hotline there. I saw that was posted. So those informations are there, and we need to encourage our students to make the phone call, the hotline. And I want to commend to our staff, make sure take this very seriously. For me, 12 years, I know there was one case before and brought it up, and we take it very seriously. There was one, not exactly same case. I remember we even have to call the police, and we stopped employee to work at that moment for further investigation. And that's how I see in the past we've been practiced. Am I correct, Dr. Su? If the case is...
I do recall that case as well. Thank you.
So
Can I just say one thing? Because I was looking at things, like I said, I'm commenting kind of cold today, but I'm looking at, I'm looking at an email that I sent to somebody regarding child abuse reporting. And the follow-up written report is actually supposed to be filed within 36 hours. I think I indicated 3 days, actually 36 hours. The initial telephone report is immediate. The follow-up written report is within 36 hours of receiving information.
But I also remember for our school is we change a lot. I remember we used to like 24-hour Dr. Mary Sue would report it to us. Now we're moving immediately right away. I think Board Member Mendoza was asking that too. We need to know right away when incident happened. Unfortunately, what I see this situation today, what happened is apparently the school didn't even know what's happening. And some of the complaint came from far away. And I think this is a lesson learned to us. And I really appreciate Board Member Apodaca had followed the student, but we need to be carefully on this matter, really be careful. We have a president here, and we have Mary Sue, we hired them. We need to take action. Like Jean said, how many, 36 hours, right?
36 hours.
Actually, I know our staff can handle immediately when a situation like that. They report, they'll connect even our police officer right away. And this has had happened before, and I trust the staff would do it. And I think a board member also need to trust our president and our immediate staff who work with us, Dr. Su. We need to work that toward the direction. Otherwise, we are jeopardize ourselves and also the whole district, the name of the district, and the student protection too, because apparently the name was mentioned on the last public comment on the student. I don't even know this is a reporter. People would use that, go against even our district. I don't know. I'm just saying I worry about that. Am I right, Mr. Baca?
Yes, I think it's appropriate to worry about that, especially, and it's hard to read people's minds when they're making public comment. But when they begin to make public comment on things that you know are inappropriate, for example, naming students, I do think it's appropriate for the board president to warn the individual that's confidential pupil student information. We're going to ask you not to use names of students. If it's employees, there's very little we can do. I mean, if you have a chance to Google the Baca versus Marino case, you'll see how the court treats that.
Yeah, I actually accidentally yesterday I read the report. That's why I brought it here today. Okay. Yeah, and I also want to commend it to board member clerk. As a clerk, you know, you always read into at the beginning. You was talking about the public comment where they need to be aware of that. And the last meeting, I think that's the things, the lesson learned. I'm so glad you brought it up. We will see them, then that way we can. Our board's going to change to 3 minutes. We can hear more public comment. We'll give them more chance to listen to them. Even during the agenda, people, we have a problem, Dr. Su, people cannot, you know how we, board presidents say, you know, any comment upon the public when we face the agenda item, specific item. And I don't think the public can come in because it was blocked. You know, and I'm glad Scott is looking into it. So eventually we will open to the public. We have to be careful because, you know, public has one side because this has chair room, has everything for our board. So we have to be careful, release information out. Because one is for us, for the board, and the other thing is for others. As you can see, we have 17 people out there in our group right now, and I think we have staff monitor that. Am I right, Dr. Su? Currently with the board and the Zoom right now, in our Zoom, we have 7 people in there.
I'm sorry, 7
If
people.
anybody monitor our Zoom right now, we have 7 people in watching it. Who are those 17? Anybody monitor that?
Are you talking about people who are watching our board meetings?
Who are in this Zoom?
Our participants. There are 17 participants.
17 of us. 17.
If somebody monitor that, because what if, I'm saying that right now, Ms. Baca, what if the information we get from our district, the password, the Zoom number has been leased out? Because I am a concern. A lot of times the things hasn't even go out yet. I mean, I can tell you one of the meeting, we haven't decided time yet. All of a sudden, everyone knows we have a meeting. So how did they come out? So somehow, Ms. Baca, I am a concern. The information is released out without hasn't consent to the board yet. So I am a concern right now. We have 17 people. So I keep and flip and see who are the people there. I want to commend to our district staff. Make sure you monitor who are those participating in here. And it's going to be cautious to watch out in the future for when you have a public comment. Am I right, Mr. Baca?
Yes, I mean, that's one of the lessons we're learning in this COVID world of ours, is how to monitor things of that sort and protect ourselves as well. So
I do that. I do, because I do a lot of Zoom teaching. I do a lot. So I'm really cautious watching it. So you have now we're going to have which is our community to join with us. We need to, I'm commend to Mr. Smith, you need to pay attention on that matter. You know, just we're talking about confidential information, closed section meeting, we need to be cautious watching it. Thank you, President. And definitely, if I have anything, I'll report it to you, Mr. Rios, Dr. Rios.
So I also have a comment, but before we do that, thank you, Mr. Baca, for joining us. I feel like people are using the term sexual harassment and sexual assault interchangeably. So I would like from your legal perspective to please define that for us. And I know you said you're doing this cold, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can clarify the difference.
Yeah, I think an assault is when there is an unlawful meeting, a physical meeting between 2 individuals, and that can occur even if they're not in the same present area. So, but an assault is something where there is an attack that occurs. Harassment can be a form of assault. I mean, certainly assault can be a form of harassment as well, but harassment is usually from an employment standpoint, either a quid pro quo, meaning that something is expected in exchange for something else, and it usually involves a person who has more power over another person. Or it can be, harassment can be just the environment that is created that has made things unbearable. So harassment and assault are interchangeable to an extent, but an assault is something that potentially could be criminal. So can harassment be assault? So, you know, it's a very nuanced difference.
And as far as mandated reporting, are we mandated for the public's sake to report sexual harassment and sexual assault, or just one?
Yeah, it's child abuse that needs to be reported. And sexual harassment can be a form of child abuse because psychological harm is something that is included in child abuse. Certainly, sexual assault absolutely needs to be reported. If a reasonable person feels that a child has been psychologically injured, that person can report it. Now, ultimately, the authorities will make a determination if it's criminal or if it's not criminal, or if there needs to be intervention or not. And the employee is completely immune from any potential prosecution for the report itself. So the answer is assault, absolutely. Harassment, not always absolutely, but if you believe that there's psychological harm, I recommend it. And when I do my seminars on child abuse reporting, I normally end by saying, if in doubt, report.
Thank you. Okay, my comments really begin with and. You know, a lot was brought up today. And, you know, one thing that I heard, well, you know, my doctorate really surrounded on the idea of a gap analysis. And we always look, if there's a problem in education, we look at three things. You know, is there a gap in knowledge? Is there a gap in motivation? Or is there a gap in resources? And I'd like to start with knowledge. You know, an ounce of prevention is worth, what does the saying say, a pound of cure? So I like to focus a lot of our efforts, in addition to what was already mentioned, on prevention. And, you know, I was lucky enough to participate in a program at Cerritos High School, as a matter of fact, where a student initiated a sexual harassment educational program. And she brought in students, and I think it was We Rise Above. And, you know, it was discussed about expanding it to the district. But I think that students want to be better educated in the area of sexual harassment. As parents, we know the importance of both. You know, I have a daughter and a son, and this issue is of high importance to me for both of them. So it's important that, yes, we educate them in the home, but also take advantage of the opportunities that the school can afford in better educating students in the area of sexual harassment and sexual assault. So I'd really encourage us to look at our practices, to look at our culture, because I was also disturbed by the idea that these kids did not come forward, and that, you know, there wasn't that sense of safety for them to trust an adult on their campus to share that they were being made to feel uncomfortable or worse. So again, challenges create opportunities. This is an opportunity for us to really step up and better serve our students, and in regards to their safety and in regards to their emotional well-being. You know, somebody also mentioned we have wellness coordinators at every one of our sites. Maybe this is something that we can task of them. We already have systems in place. I think it's just the practices and our culture that needs to be improved and enhanced. With that, I did get a request to do a comment, and because a board member was singled out, I do want to give him a chance to respond. So first we'll have Vice President Mendoza.
Thank you, Madam President. I had a question for Mr. Baca. You suggested that we change our public comments from 5 to 3. Do we need to make a change to our policy for that?
Dr. Sue, do we actually have a policy on the amount of time?
It's part of our bylaws.
Is it in your bylaws?
Yes.
Okay, then the answer is yes. It's something.
So we cannot do that for the next meeting. We have to agendize that.
Can I chip in by my personal experience? If we change it, we can each board meeting. I remember what we did before. We can speak right before the meeting. We will say today, since we open to the public, Zoom to everyone, the board can make the decision on each board meeting. We can change today. We want the meeting for 3 minutes. We can do that. And remember, we did that before, right at the time we open to the public comments.
Mr.
Or
Baca,
to
could
make
you
a decision.
That's something we'll look at, Ms.
Mhm.
Mendoza, and bring it to the board at the next meeting.
Thank you. I don't want to just start making changes just because, you know, to fit our needs through Zoom, our Zoom meetings. I want to make sure we're following our policy. And then I was listening to all my colleagues speak, and the issue that brought us here is because it came out on social media the first time we heard about it. We usually hear things through social media before we do through staff. Now, I have a question for Dr. Su. Did Dr. Apodaca let you know that this was happening?
He let me know once about an issue at Cerritos High School.
Yeah, and I remember finding it and sending it to you. And I think as board members, when we see something, we need to send it straight to Dr. Su. Don't call the principal, because even though we have a good relationship with them, I think it's only fair that all board members get the same information at the same time in a timely manner. And that brings me to my next question. I know that sometimes as board members, we get sent emails, and sometimes we're all working and we don't get to check our emails. Is there another form of communication, Mr. Baca, that your other districts have used to send out very important information to board members without breaking the Brown Act?
If it's purely informational, you can send a text.
Okay.
If you have district telephones. Do you have district telephones?
We do not.
Do you have district telephone numbers?
No.
Okay. It would not be inappropriate if somebody has not received something through an email to send them a text, if that's a preferred way. It's not as secure as an email, but emails nowadays are not all that secure. In the Brown Act, you cannot try to get the consensus of the board. You can't help boards to deliberate on matters that could come before the board, but you can the superintendent can provide the board with information. And that information can be telephonically, it can be through email, it could be through text. But if it's purely informational, then it's not inappropriate for the superintendent to utilize either any of those means.
I think that would be good for board members, because sometimes, you know, we're working and we don't get to our emails until 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night. And sometimes, you know, it's already gone, social media's blown up. And then my last comment is that I've heard my colleagues say we want to push this off, but we've pushed this off a long time. Our community wanted us to address this. And I think if we push it off again, they're gonna say, like, you know, they're gonna question us, why are you continuing to put this off? So I would just ask my colleagues to, you know, I know our meetings are getting longer and it's getting more difficult, but if it's something that the community wants us to address, I think we should address it. That ends my comments, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, then, did we have a motion on the floor?
I have a question with President Dr. Rios. So what is it today? What is our focus? What is the really decision we want to make to accomplish?
That's what my question is. Is there a motion on the floor regarding this informational item?
Madam President, if I may be recognized.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I believe if we don't want to go to an action item right away for the next meeting or the meeting after that, I think it's time for us to, with Mr. Baca, with legal counsel, go through the policies that we have with regards to disseminating the stance of the district when it comes to consequences for failure to not report, as well as what he and I initially discussed at the beginning of the information item, which included a policy, a district-wide policy when it comes to those who are in possession of any kind of explicit photos without the consent of another student or of a minor, and then consequences. So I guess my motion is to continue this conversation, working with legal counsel to draft a new policy based off of the conversations that were had tonight. I trust staff. I absolutely trust our district staff to take and to review the notes from tonight and to watch this from the very beginning and to craft and put something together. And I think we should give them ample time to that. So I would like to make a motion to direct staff to bring back to the board no later than the second meeting of September, working with—
Please. Clarification, Dr. Apodaca.
What do you got?
just want to ask you, so I think board member Nishi was suggested, what do you think? For the policy to the policy committee, have them to review. Is that what
That'll
you
be part of
want?
my motion for sure. That'll be part of my motion for sure.
I think that's
Absolutely.
wonderful. Yeah, I think that would be much clearer because what you have today is the mandate reporting to all staff that interact with students. This is that we have that already. We'll have to revisit our policy, even though Dr. Su
Correct.
had it last year. Is that what you want?
So if I may finish my motion, absolutely. But yes. So if you look at the nuances of that, it also goes into, if you look at how it drops down, they also include sexual harassment reporting, all that other stuff. I'd like to make a motion to direct staff to work with legal counsel, AALRR, to report back a new, revised, modern to address social media, as well as possession of illegal media on private devices of our students when enforceable. And to then make us a policy recommendation no later than the second board meeting of September for us to then send to the legislative policy committee for recommendation and revision.
Clarification, Dr. Su. I also want to know our policy legislative committee, when they're going to start, because right now it's COVID-19.
They've already started. They've already reviewed some of the board policies, especially the one on equity. They've already reviewed it.
Thank you. Back to you, Dr. Apodaca, the floor to you.
No, it's important to know that. That's my motion.
Do we have a second?
Second, Mendoza.
Roll call, Natalie, please.
Dr. Apodaca?
Yes. Wait. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So I thought this was an information item.
It's an information item. You can, during an information item, direct staff to bring something back to you. So
Okay.
it's not an action item. It's just direction to staff. And it's appropriate under parliamentary procedure to get a consensus of the board. So
right. It's so for redirect. Yeah.
So continue with the roll call, please.
Mr. Long? Mrs. Mendoza?
Yes.
Mr. Nishii?
Yes.
Dr. Rios?
Yes.
Mrs. Say? Yes. I have one question. Somebody just joined in, so-called Mel's iPhone. Do you know who that person is? MEL?
Yes, that's Miss Ortiz. She just switched her item.
Okay. President, I just watched. I'm zoning teacher. I'm very cautious who's in and out. Sorry about that.
Continue with the roll call.
Mrs. Yu?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
And before calling for a motion to adjourn, I just wanted to say that, usually I take time to acknowledge our board. Our staff, and I want to continue to do that. They are doing a wonderful job. But today I really want to take time to really acknowledge our board. These are unprecedented times, yet as a board, we have continued to meet as usual and even added meetings. I think that this is the third additional meeting that we conduct and come together to continue to do the business of the district. So today we took a courageous and bold move by sharing our views on the importance of social justice and the importance of advocating for student safety and well-being. And, I read recently that the most important school supplies for this year are patience, flexibility, and grace. I want to take time to thank people in our community who acknowledge our efforts and have afforded us the patience, flexibility, and grace. Thank you. Deciding to move forward with our meeting was a non-issue. How to be as transparent as possible has always been of great importance to us. And I think that the most challenging part of our meeting has been the public comments. And we value the voices of all our stakeholders. And I hope that we can continue to do so in a way that is socially responsible and also transparent. Thank you, Mr. Baca, for joining us tonight and helping us, especially shedding light on, on these very important issues and what our role is as board members.
Dr. Rios, a clarification for the next,
meeting.
We're not, I know, but I just want to know, are we going to have the public comment next time? Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye, Dr. Rios. Have a good day.
Thank you for joining us.
It was wonderful.
Yes.
It's beautiful.
To our teachers, please shower them with patience, flexibility, and grace. Best of luck to our students and families. May they also be showered with patience, flexibility, and grace. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Rios. Beautiful.
Motion
Can we need a
to
motion to adjourn?
adjourn,
Second.
yes?
Second, Sophia.
Okay. Now, what did you want to say, Sophia?
I
That's
great. Clarification, we're going to improving our communication with the community, right? For the next meeting, board member, Dr. Su. We're going to improving our communication with our community, right? The public, the next meeting. And we're also going to change it to meeting, right?
Okay, so board members say, do you recognize that there was an appropriate time to make that comment?
I forgot, you talked first.
Right, and as president, I think I have the
You didn't give a chance. You didn't get the board report.
More than happy to yield the floor to you after my statement was completed.
I love you, Dr. Rios. You are wonderful.
Thank you. Then please afford me the respect that this position warrants.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Okay, so did we have a motion on the floor?
Yeah, we had a second.
Yes.
Abaraka first, I'm second.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Apodaca,
Yes.
Mr. Long, Mrs. Mendoza,
Yes.
Mr. Nishi,
Yes.
Dr. Rios,
Yes.
Mrs. Say,
Yes.
Mrs. Yu. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Night.